What if Theon Greyjoy was never taken as a hostage? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The smoke still rises from the shattered towers of Pike when King Robert Baratheon and Lord Eddard Stark stand in the ruins of the Great Hall. The seastone chair sits cracked and blackened, its ancient power broken alongside the rebellion it represented. Balon Greyjoy kneels before them, his face a mask of barely contained fury and defeat. 2 of his sons are dead. His fleet lies at the bottom of the sea. His kingdom is ash. Robert shifts his considerable weight from one foot to the other, his war hammer still in his hands. The king's breathing is labored from the final assault, but his eyes burn with the satisfaction of victory. He has crushed another rebellion. He has reminded the 7 kingdoms who rules. Your sons died like fools, Balon, Robert says, his voice echoing in the damaged hall. Roderick at Seaguard, Maren on these very walls. They could have lived if you'd bent the knee when I told you to. Balon's jaw tightens, but he says nothing. Behind him, 10-year-old Theon Greyjoy stands with his hands at his sides, trying not to tremble. The boy has watched his brothers die. He has seen his father's rebellion crumble. Now he waits to learn his fate. Ned Stark steps forward, his grey eyes studying the defeated lord. The hand of the king has seen enough bloodshed for one day. His sword is clean, but his conscience is heavy. Taking Pike required brutal fighting. Many good men died breaking through these walls. The boy comes with us, Ned says quietly. He'll be raised at Winterfell as my ward. Insurance against future foolishness. It is the expected thing, the traditional thing. Hostages have kept the peace in Westeros for 1,000 years. Take the heir, raise him well, and his father will think twice about rebellion. Robert nods his approval. But then Theon steps forward. The boy's voice cracks as he speaks. I won't leave my father. The words hang in the salt-thick air like a challenge. Robert's hand tightens on his hammer. Ned raises an eyebrow. This is not how surrenders work. This is not how hostages behave. Balon looks at his last surviving son with something that might be pride. Despite everything, despite the defeat and the death, Theon stands firm. The boy is afraid, but he does not run. He does not beg. He plants his feet and faces the king of the 7 kingdoms. I'm the heir to the Iron Islands, Theon continues, his young voice growing stronger. My place is here, with my people. Robert studies the boy for a long moment. There is something in Theon's defiance that reminds the king of himself at that age. When Robert was 10, he would have done the same thing. He would have stood by his father's side and dared the world to move him. You'd stay with this broken fool? Robert asks, gesturing at Balon with his hammer. You'd choose rocks and salt water over the finest castle in the north? Theon nods without hesitation. I choose my home. Ned frowns. He understands loyalty, but this complicates everything. Without the boy as insurance, how do they ensure Balon's future obedience? How do they prevent another rebellion in 10 or 15 years? Your Grace, Ned says carefully. The traditional arrangement has kept the peace for— Fuck tradition, Robert interrupts. He looks down at Theon again, or then at the kneeling Balon. An idea is forming in the king's mind. A different kind of lesson. Robert walks over to where father and son stand together. His massive frame towers over them both, but neither flinches. They are beaten, but they are not broken. That matters to Robert Baratheon. That has always mattered to him. Here's what's going to happen, Squid, Robert says to Balon. You're going to pay tribute, real tribute. Gold, silver, whatever you can drag out of these rocks. Enough to fund my armies for the next 5 years. Balon's face goes pale. Gold is harder to replace than ships or men. Gold bleeds a kingdom slowly, year after year. Furthermore, Robert continues, I'm placing observers in your castles, tax collectors, royal officials. They'll watch every move you make, count every coin you spend. I'll try to build another fleet, and I'll hear about it within the week. Ned looks uncertain. This is not the usual arrangement. This leaves room for future trouble. But Robert is not finished. He kneels down to Theon's level, bringing his scarred face close to the boy's. "And you, little lord," Robert says quietly, "you're going to remember this day. You're going to remember that your father's pride cost him 2 sons, and his kingdom's freedom. When you're older, when you're the one making decisions, you'll remember who showed mercy when he could have taken your head." Theon stares into Robert's eyes and nods slowly. He understands. This is not kindness. This is a different kind of lesson. Robert stands and addresses them both. "I could take the boy. I could execute you both and give these islands to someone more manageable. Instead, I'm giving you a chance to prove that the Iron Islands can be part of my kingdom without hostages or executions. Don't make me regret it." The king turns to his men. "Seize their treasury. Install our tax collectors in every major castle. Set up a permanent garrison on Great Wick. I want to know every time these people piss without permission." As the royal forces begin their occupation, Theon moves closer to his father. Balon is still kneeling, still defeated, but he is not alone. His son stands beside him, choosing loyalty over comfort, choosing the hard path over the easy one. Ned Stark watches this unfold with mixed feelings. Part of him admires the boy's courage, part of him worries about the precedent this sets. But Robert has made his decision, and Ned will support his king, as always. "This is a mistake," one of Robert's bannermen mutters to another. "The boy should come with us. That's how we prevent future rebellions." But Robert overhears and shakes his head. "Taking children makes enemies for life," he says. "Sometimes the hardest chains to break are the ones made of gratitude and debt." Over the following weeks, royal administrators flood into the Iron Islands. They catalogue every asset, every ship, every coin. They interview every captain and count every sword. The occupation is thorough and humiliating, but it is not brutal. No more blood is shed. Theon watches it all. He sees his father's authority diminished daily by foreign officials who treat Iron Island customs like curiosities at best and barbarisms at worst. He watches proud reavers reduced to fishermen and traders under the watchful eyes of royal tax collectors. But he also learns. Every night, Balon sits with his son and explains what went wrong, how the rebellion was planned, why it failed, what mistakes were made. It is an education no hostage would ever receive, an understanding of statecraft and warfare that comes only from defeat honestly examined. "Power is not just about taking," Balon tells his son as they stand on the ruins of Pike's great tower. "It's about knowing when to take and when to wait. Your brothers understood the first part. They never learned the second." Theon absorbs these lessons, like sea-soaked wood absorbs flame. He learns about patience from defeat. He learns about strategy from failure. He learns that sometimes the strongest choice is the one that looks like weakness to everyone else. The royal observers send their reports to King's Landing. Lord Theon Greyjoy appears thoroughly cowed. His son shows no signs of inherited rebellion. The tribute payments arrive on schedule. The Iron Islands seem pacified. But in the depths of Pike's remaining dungeons, in the secret meetings held during midnight tides, in the quiet conversations between father and son, something else is growing. Not another mindless rebellion like the last one, but something more patient, something more dangerous. Robert Baratheon's mercy will be remembered, as he intended. But whether that memory breeds loyalty or resentment remains to be seen. The Iron Islands are still the Iron Islands after all. And Theon Greyjoy is still learning what it means to be his father's son. The smoke from the burning rebellion has cleared. The occupation is complete. But the story of the Iron Islands is far from over. In the months and years to come, the decision to leave Theon with his father will echo through the Seven Kingdoms in ways that no one can yet imagine. For now, a 10-year-old boy stands on the cliffs of Pike, watching the royal fleet sail away. He made his choice. He stayed with his people, with his father, with his birthright. The consequences of that choice will shape the future of Westeros itself. The waves crash against the rocks below, as they have for thousands of years, as they will for thousands more. The sea remembers everything and forgives nothing. And Theon Greyjoy is learning to be a son of the sea. 6 years have passed since the royal observers came to the Iron Islands. The boy who once stood defiant in the ruins of Pike has grown into something his father can be proud of. Theon Greyjoy, now 16, stands on the deck of a longship, cutting through the choppy waters off Great Wick. His dark hair whips in the salt wind as he adjusts the rigging with practiced hands. This is not the uncertain child who watched his brothers die. This is an Iron Islander, born and bred, shaped by 6 years of his father's careful teaching and the harsh lessons of the sea. The royal tax collectors see a young lord learning to manage his future holdings. They do not see the Reaver Ballon has been quietly forging. "Steady as she goes," Theon calls to his crew as they approach a Lannisport merchant vessel. The ship flies under false colors, just another fishing boat returning from the nets. But beneath the deck, 20 armed men wait for the signal. This is how the game is played now, under the noses of Robert's watchers. The merchant captain waves as they pass, expecting nothing more than a friendly greeting between seafaring men. He does not notice the subtle hand signals passing between the two crews. He does not see the grappling hooks being readied below deck. Theon gives the nod. The attack is swift and brutal. The fishing boat transforms into a war galley in moments, revealing its true nature as armed ironborn swarm aboard the merchant vessel. The crew barely has time to draw steel before they are overwhelmed. "Yield and live," Theon shouts over the clash of weapons. "Fight and feed the fish." Most of the merchants throw down their arms. Yet they know the reputation of Iron Island raiders, even if they do not recognize the young lord leading them. The smart ones save their lives. The foolish ones die quickly. Within minutes, the merchant ship is taken. Its cargo hold reveals bolts of silk, chests of silver, and barrels of Dornish wine. A good haul, worth more than a year's tribute to the Iron Throne. More importantly, it sends a message that the Ironborn are not as defeated as they appear. "Strip her clean," Theon orders his men. "Leave nothing of value, but no unnecessary killing. We're raiders, not butchers." It is a lesson his father taught him well. Brutality has its place, but so does restraint. The merchant sailors who survive will spread word of Iron Island strength. The ones who die tell no tales at all. As his crew works, Theon studies the captured ship's manifest. The vessel was bound for White Harbor, carrying goods for northern lords. Taking it will be noticed, but not immediately. By the time anyone connects this raid to the Iron Islands, the evidence will be scattered across a dozen secret coves. "My lord," one of his men calls out, "found something you should see." The sailor presents a leather tube containing official documents. Theon breaks the seal and reads quickly. Letters between Lord Stark and Lord Manderley, discussing grain shipments and trade agreements. Nothing earth-shaking, but useful intelligence nonetheless. "Burn the letters," Theon says. "But remember what they said. Father will want to know about northern trade routes. The return journey to Pike takes them through waters that few mainlanders ever see. Hidden channels between the smaller islands, protected harbors that appear on no royal charts. Here, in the secret heart of the Iron Islands, Balon Greyjoy's true plans are taking shape. The first sign is the smell of pitch and sawdust on the wind, then the sound of hammers on wood echoing from concealed inlets. As Theon's longship rounds a familiar headland, the sight that greets him would shock any royal observer fortunate enough to witness it. Ships. Dozens of them in various stages of construction, war galleys and longships, raiders and transport vessels, all built in secret, all hidden from prying eyes, all paid for with the gold taken in raids like today's. Balon Greyjoy stands on a crude wooden pier, watching his son's return with satisfaction. 6 years of humiliation haven't broken the Lord of the Iron Islands. They have simply taught him patience. "A good hunt?" Balon asks as Theon jumps down from his ship. "Good enough," Theon replies, gesturing to the captured goods being unloaded. "Lannisport silk and Dornish gold, plus intelligence about northern shipping routes." Balon nods approvingly. The boy has learned well, not just how to fight and raid, but how to think strategically. Every captured ship provides more than just treasure. It provides information about enemy movements, trade patterns, and military preparations. "The lords are gathering tonight," Balon tells his son. "Time you heard the full scope of our plans." That evening, the Great Hall of Pike plays host to a meeting that would terrify King Robert if he knew of it. The lords of the Iron Islands sit around a massive table, their faces lit by torchlight and their voices low with conspiracy. Theon Greyjoy, Balon's brother and captain of the Iron Fleet, reports on the progress of ship construction. 60 vessels completed, 40 more within the moon's turn. We'll have 100 longships by year's end. Theon Greyjoy, the youngest brother, speaks of stirring the religious fervor of the islands. The priests remember the old ways. They speak of the drowned god's favor for those who take the iron price. Roderick Harlaw, Balon's good brother, provides intelligence from his spy network. The royal observers grow complacent. They count coins and catalogue fishing boats, but they do not venture into the deeper waters. They see what we want them to see. Theon listens to it all with growing excitement. This is not the desperate, the hasty rebellion of 6 years past. This is methodical planning, careful preparation, strategic thinking applied to the art of war. "When do we strike?" asks Lord Volmark, his scarred hands drumming on the table. "Not yet," Balon replies firmly. "Robert grows fat and lazy in King's Landing, but his armies remain strong. We need more ships, more men, more allies, and we need the right moment." He turns to his son. "What did you learn from today's raid, boy?" Theon straightens in his chair. This is a test, and he knows it. "The northern lords grow rich from trade with Essos. Their ships carry gold, but they also carry information. Hit enough of them, and we can map their entire shipping network. And then? Then we know where to strike for maximum damage. Not just random raids, but coordinated attacks designed to cripple their economy while strengthening ours." Balon smiles with genuine pride. His son understands. War is not just about ships and swords. It is about gold and grain, trade routes, and supply lines. The boy who stayed by his father's side instead of going to Winterfell has learned lessons no hostage ever could. As the meeting progresses, Theon learns the full scope of his father's ambitions. Secret alliances with discontented lords in other kingdoms, hidden weapons caches on the mainland, spies placed in royal ports from Lannisport to White Harbor. The Iron Islands are preparing for war on a scale that dwarfs the previous rebellion. But there is one more lesson Balon has for his son, something that cannot be discussed in front of the other lords. As after the meeting ends and the conspirators disperse to their ships, father and son walk alone on the windswept cliffs above Pike. "You've done well today," Balon says. "But a lord needs more than skill at arms and cunning in war. He needs heirs." Theon frowns, uncertain where this is leading. "There's a girl," Balon continues, "Alanis Harlaw, Roderick's youngest daughter. 15 years old, suitable for a salt wife. She understands the old ways. The arrangement is practical rather than romantic, but that is the Iron Island way. Salt wives are chosen for their loyalty and their understanding of what it means to be ironborn. Love, if it comes at all, comes later." Theon meets Alanis the following week at a gathering on Harlaw. She is small and dark-haired, with the serious expression of someone raised on stories of the old ways. When she looks at him, she sees not just a young lord, but the future of the Iron Islands. "My father says you stayed when you could have gone to Winterfell," she says. during their first private conversation. That shows strength. It shows loyalty, Theon corrects, to my father, to my people, to my birthright. Same thing, she replies with a slight smile. Within a month, they are wed in the old ceremony beside the sea. Alanis becomes Theon's salt wife, bound to him by tradition and mutual understanding. She is not a great beauty like the noble ladies of the mainland, but she is fierce and loyal and utterly committed to the Iron Way of life. Their marriage solidifies Theon's position among the Iron Islands nobility. He is no longer just Balon's heir, but a lord in his own right, with his own household and his own responsibilities. What the royal observers note the wedding in their reports, describing it as a minor political alliance between island houses. They do not understand its true significance. By winter's end, troubling news reaches the royal tax collectors. Several of their number have simply vanished, disappeared during routine inspections of the smaller islands. Others report strange accidents, unfortunate falls from cliff tops, unexpected drownings in calm seas. The iron-born lords express shock and concern, naturally. Such tragedies, they say. The islands can be dangerous for those unfamiliar with their ways. Perhaps the royal observers should be more careful where they venture. What the lords do not mention is the growing network of loyalists who have been systematically eliminating the most competent and observant of Robert's watchers. Not all of them, which would be too obvious, just enough to create gaps in the surveillance, blind spots where secret work can be done. Theon participates in several of these eliminations personally, not from cruelty, but from necessity. Each royal spy represents a threat to his father's plans, a potential source of intelligence that could reach King's Landing at the wrong moment. The first man he kills is a tax collector who grows too curious about ship construction in the remote coves. Theon makes it look like a drowning, just another unfortunate accident in dangerous waters. The man's body washes up 3 days later, bloated and fish-eaten. There is no pleasure in the killing, but there is satisfaction. Each eliminated spy brings the Iron Islands one step closer to true freedom. Each successful raid fills the secret treasury that will fund the coming war. Each new ship built in the hidden harbors adds to their growing strength. By his 17th name day, Theon Greyjoy has become exactly what his father intended. A true son of the Iron Islands, shaped by salt and steel, loyal to the old ways but smart enough to adapt them for modern warfare. He leads men twice his age without question, plans raids with the skill of a seasoned captain, and kills when necessary without hesitation or regret. The royal observers who remain send increasingly optimistic reports to King's Landing. The Iron Islands appear thoroughly pacified, they write. Lord Balon pays his tribute without complaint. His son shows no signs of inherited rebelliousness. The policy of economic pressure, rather than hostages, has proven successful. But in the hidden coves and secret meetings, in the growing fleet and the strengthening alliances, a different story is taking shape. The Iron Islands are not pacified, they are preparing. And when the time comes, they will be ready to pay the iron price for their independence. The boy who chose to stay with his father, instead of going to Winterfell as a hostage, has become a weapon pointed at the heart of the Seven Kingdoms. Robert Baratheon's mercy will be repaid with interest in ways the king cannot yet imagine. 3 more years pass, and the game grows bolder. Theon Greyjoy, now 19 and hardened by countless raids, stands at the prow of his flagship as it cuts through the grey waters off the northern coast. Behind him, a dozen longships follow in perfect formation, their black sails bearing the golden kraken of his house. This is not the desperate piracy of desperate men. This is warfare disguised as banditry. The target is a fishing village on the rocky shores between White Harbour and Widow's Watch, small enough to avoid immediate attention from major lords, large enough to make the raid worthwhile. The villagers have grown prosperous, selling their catch to northern markets, and prosperity always attracts the attention of those who follow the old way. "Signal the fleet," Theon commands his captain. "Surround the harbour, but leave the main channel open. Let them think they can escape. It is a tactic he learned from studying the great naval battles of history. Give the enemy hope, and they will make mistakes. Let them think they see a way out, and they will run straight into your trap. The attack begins at dawn, but the fishing boats scattered throughout the harbour make for the open channel exactly as Theon predicted. They run straight into the waiting arms of Theon Greyjoy's war galleys, which have been positioned just out of sight beyond the harbour mouth. Within an hour, the village is taken. The fishing fleet is captured. The warehouses are emptied of their stored goods, and the villagers are given a choice that has become familiar throughout the northern coastlands. Pay tribute willingly, or have it taken by force. Most choose to pay. Word has spread of what happens to those who resist Iron Island raiders. The lucky ones lose only their goods. The unlucky ones lose much more. But as Theon's men load the captured supplies onto their ships, a lookout calls down from the village's highest tower. Ships on the horizon, my lord. Flying wolf banners. Theon climbs to see for himself. 3 war galleys approach from the south, their hulls cutting white wakes through the dark water. Northern ships flying the direwolf of House Stark. Someone has finally responded to the increasing boldness of Iron Island raids. How many men? Theon asks his captain. Hard to say from this distance, maybe 200 across all 3 ships. Theon considers his options. His dozen longships carry nearly 300 raiders, giving him superiority in numbers. But the northern ships are built for war, not just raiding. Their crews will be trained soldiers rather than simple sailors. More importantly, this represents something new. For 3 years, the northern lords have largely ignored the Iron Island raids, writing them off as simple piracy, not worth a major military response. If House Stark is sending warships, it means Lord Eddard has decided the situation requires more serious attention. Signal the fleet to prepare for battle, Theon orders. But keep the formation loose. I want to see what kind of fight these wolves can give us. As the northern ships draw closer, Theon can make out their commander, standing at the prow of the lead vessel, a young man with auburn hair and the long face of House Stark. Even at this distance, there is something familiar about him. The realization hits Theon like a physical blow. Robb Stark, Ned Stark's eldest son and heir, now 15 years old and leading his first military command, the boy who might have been Theon's foster brother if history had unfolded differently. My lord, his captain says urgently. They're signaling for parley. Theon studies the approaching ships. 3 against 12 should be no contest, but something about the confident way the northern fleet approaches makes him cautious. Robb Stark would not sail into an obviously losing battle unless he had some advantage Theon cannot see. Very well, Theon decides. Signal acceptance, but keep the men ready for action. The parley takes place on the water between the 2 fleets, with small boats carrying the commanders to a neutral position. Theon brings only his captain and 2 guards. Robb Stark arrives with similar escort, his young face serious and determined. This is their first meeting, though each knows the other by reputation. Theon sees the boy he might have grown up alongside, trained with, called brother. Robb sees the heir to the house that has been terrorizing his father's coastal villages for 3 years. Theon Greyjoy, Robb says by way of greeting. His voice is steady despite his youth. I expected someone older. Robb Stark, Theon replies. I expected someone with a larger fleet. They study each other across the narrow space between their boats. There is no hatred here, not yet. But there is wariness and the recognition that they stand on opposite sides of a conflict that grows more serious with each passing month. You've been busy these past years, Robb continues. Fishing villages, merchant ships, trade caravans. My father wants it to stop. Your father should mind his own waters, Theon responds. The sea belongs to those strong enough to claim it. These are our waters. These are our people you're robbing. Were our people before your king's tax collectors came to bleed us dry. The exchange reveals the deeper tensions underlying the surface conflict. This is not just about raiding and tribute. This is about competing claims to justice, competing definitions of legitimacy, competing visions of how the world should work. "I have orders to stop you," Robb says finally. "By negotiation if possible, by force if necessary." Theon glances at the 3 northern ships, then at his own fleet of 12. "You're outnumbered 4-1. What force did you have in mind?" Robb's slight smile suggests he knows something Theon does not. "You're thinking like a reaver, not a sailor. Numbers aren't everything in a sea battle." As if on cue, the water around Theon's fleet begins to churn. 8 additional ships emerge from hidden coves along the coastline, war galleys flying the banners of House Manderley and House Flint. The trap is sprung with perfect timing, cutting off the Iron Islanders' escape routes while maintaining the pretense of negotiation. Theon has to admit he is impressed. For a 15-year-old leading his first campaign, Robb Stark shows remarkable strategic thinking. The boy has inherited his father's honor, but also something more dangerous: tactical intelligence. "Clever," Theon acknowledges. "But you still can't match our speed in open water." "Maybe not," Robb agrees. "But I can make you pay a price for running. The question is whether that price is worth whatever you've stolen from this village." It is a calculation Theon makes quickly. His ships are faster and more maneuverable, but they are also loaded with captured goods. Fighting his way out would mean casualties among his men, and possibly losing the prizes they have taken. More importantly, it would escalate the conflict to a new level. "What are you proposing?" Theon asks. "Leave the village's goods, take your ships and go. No blood spilled today." Theon considers the offer. It is more generous than he expected, which makes him suspicious. "And in return?" "In return, I don't send word to my father that Iron Island raiders are operating with fleet-level organization. 1 village raid is piracy. 12 coordinated longships is an act of war. The threat is clear and intelligent. If Lord Stark learns the true scope of Iron Island preparations, he will demand immediate action from King Robert. The secret fleet building, the systematic raids, the careful planning, all of it will be exposed before Balon is ready to strike." "You drive a hard bargain for someone who's outnumbered," Theon says. "I learned from my father that sometimes the best victory is the one that prevents a larger war." After a long moment, Theon nods. "Very well. We'll return the goods and withdraw. But understand, Lord Stark, this changes nothing. The Iron Islands have grievances that won't be settled by negotiation." "I understand," Robb replies. "But remember that the North has a long memory too. Push too far, and you'll find we can push back." The parley ends with mutual respect, but no real resolution. Both young men return to their fleets, knowing that this is only the beginning of a larger conflict. The goods are returned to the village, the Iron Island raiders withdraw to deeper waters, and the Northern Fleet sails south with a victory that costs nothing but prevents everything. But the real battle fought this day is not over captured fish or stolen silver. It is over information and intelligence, over what each side now knows about the other. Robb Stark has learned that Iron Island raids are far more organized and dangerous than previously believed. Theon Greyjoy has learned that the young heir of Winterfell is not just another untested lordling. When Theon returns to Pike with empty holds but valuable knowledge, his father is not pleased with the tactical retreat. Balon Greyjoy listens to his son's report with growing irritation, his scarred hands clenched into fists. "You had 12 ships against 3, and you let them dictate terms?" "I had 12 ships against 15. But once their reinforcements appeared," Theon corrects, "and fighting would have revealed the true scope of our preparations. Better to withdraw and maintain the illusion that we're just desperate pirates." Balon considers this for a long moment. His son has a point, but it goes against every instinct of the Iron Island way. The old way says, take what you can, when you can, by force, if necessary. The new way requires patience and strategy. "This Stark boy," Balon says finally, "he could be a problem." He's already a problem, Theon replies, but he's also an opportunity. Over the following weeks, Theon develops his thoughts into a comprehensive strategy that impresses even his father's war council. Instead of random raids designed simply to gather wealth, he proposes systematic attacks designed to weaken northern defenses and gather intelligence about mainland military capabilities. Every raid should serve multiple purposes, Theon explains to the assembled lords. Gold, yes, but also information. Ship counts, patrol schedules, response times. By the time we're ready for open war, we'll know more about northern defenses than the northerners do themselves. The strategy requires patience, but it also requires a different kind of courage. Instead of the straightforward brutality of traditional Iron Island warfare, Theon proposes something more subtle and more dangerous. Psychological warfare designed to make enemies out of allies, economic warfare designed to starve the mainland of resources, intelligence warfare designed to leave opponents fighting blind. It is during this period of strategic planning that an unexpected message arrives at Pike. The raven bears the seal of House Martell of Dawn, and its contents intrigue Theon Greyjoy greatly. Prince Doran Martell, it seems, has heard rumors of renewed Iron Island strength. More interestingly, he has heard rumors of renewed Iron Island grievances against the Iron Throne. The Prince of Dawn suggests that houses with similar complaints might find mutual benefit in quiet cooperation. The letter is carefully worded and commits no one to anything specific, but the implications are clear. Dawn has not forgotten Elia Martell or the children killed during the sack of King's Landing. If Robert Baratheon faces threats from multiple directions simultaneously, he will be forced to divide his attention and his armies. It's worth exploring, Theon advises his father, but carefully. If word of such discussions reaches King's Landing before we're ready, it ruins everything. Balon agrees, and discreet communications begin flowing between Pike and Sunspear. Nothing treasonous, nothing that could not be explained as simple courtesy between noble houses. But slowly, carefully, the foundations of a broader alliance begin to take shape. Meanwhile, the tribute payments from the Iron Islands to King's Landing begin to arrive late and short. Not dramatically so. Balon is too clever for that. But enough to test Robert's resolve, to see how seriously the king takes his economic pressure strategy. The response is predictable. Stern letters from the capital demanding full and prompt payment. Threats of renewed military action if compliance does not improve. But no actual action, no fleets dispatched or armies marshalled. Robert Baratheon is content to bluster and threaten, but not yet ready to back up his words with steel. He grows soft, Theon Greyjoy observes during one of the secret war councils. 10 years ago, he would have sailed here himself to collect what was owed. 10 years ago, he had something to prove, Theon replies. Now he just wants to be left alone, to hunt and drink and whore. That laziness is our greatest advantage. By year's end, the Iron Islands have become something unprecedented in their long history, still ostensibly loyal subjects of the Iron Throne, paying reduced tribute and accepting royal observers. But secretly, they have become a kingdom preparing for war with the methodical precision of a siege engine being wound tight. Theon Greyjoy, what the boy who chose to stay with his father instead of going to Winterfell as a hostage, has become the architect of that preparation. His raids provide intelligence and treasure, his strategies shape the coming conflict, and his diplomatic initiatives lay the groundwork for alliances that could change the balance of power throughout Westeros. The encounter with Robb Stark serves as both warning and opportunity. Warning that the mainland kingdoms are not blind to Iron Island activities. Opportunity to measure the quality of the opposition and find it surprisingly formidable. When Theon stands on the cliffs of Pike at year's end, watching his father's growing fleet conduct night training exercises in the moonlit waters below, he knows that the next phase of the conflict is approaching. The raids and the testing, the diplomatic overtures and the military preparations, all of it has been leading to something larger. The Iron Islands are no longer just enduring the peace imposed after their failed rebellion. They are actively preparing to shatter it, and when that day comes, they will be ready in ways that Robert Baratheon and his complacent kingdom cannot yet imagine. The year 299, AIAC, dawns with storm clouds gathering over the Iron Islands, both literal and figurative. Theon Greyjoy stands in the Great Hall of Pike, surrounded by the banners of every major house in the islands. The Seastone chair has been restored to its ancient glory, its black stone polished to a mirror shine. Today it will seat a king once more. 10 years have passed since the first rebellion. 10 years of careful planning, secret preparation, and growing strength. Or the boy who stayed by his father's side, instead of going to Winterfell as a hostage, has become a man of 20, scarred by countless raids and hardened by the unforgiving sea. Theon Greyjoy stands at his father's right hand, no longer an heir, but a proven war leader in his own right. "My lords," Theon declares to the assembled nobility, "we have endured a decade of humiliation. Foreign tax collectors bleeding our islands dry. Royal observers counting our ships and cataloguing our strength. Tribute paid to a fat king who grows lazier with each passing year." The hall erupts in angry murmurs. Every lord present has felt the sting of defeat, the shame of submission. But they have also felt the growing confidence that comes from secret success. The hidden fleet numbers nearly 200 ships now. The treasury overflows with gold taken in raids. Allied houses from Dawn to the Riverlands wait for word that the time has come. "No more," Balon continues, his voice rising. "The Iron Islands bow to no mainland king. We are a free people, and today we reclaim our freedom." He draws his sword and raises it high. "I am Balon Greyjoy, Lord Reaper of Pike, King of the Iron Islands and the North." The claim to the North is audacious, but not without precedent. Ancient Ironborn kings once ruled from Old Town to the Wall. The current claim is more symbolic than practical, but it sends a clear message. This rebellion will not be limited to the islands themselves. Theon steps forward as his father takes the Seastone chair. "The fleets are ready, Your Grace. 200 ships, 10,000 men. Of the mainland kingdoms have grown fat and complacent. They expect us to follow the old pattern, to strike recklessly and be crushed by superior numbers. They are about to learn how wrong they are." The strategy Theon has developed over years of careful planning unfolds like a master chess player, revealing a winning combination. Unlike the desperate, unfocused rebellion of a decade ago, this assault is coordinated, systematic, and devastating in its precision. The first strike comes at dawn against Lannisport. Theon Greyjoy leads 60 war galleys into the harbour, while the city still sleeps. But this is not the random destruction of the previous rebellion. Every target has been chosen for maximum strategic impact. The shipyards burn first, eliminating the Westerland's ability to build new vessels. Then the warehouses, destroying months of accumulated trade goods. Finally, the docks themselves, denying the harbour to any relief fleet. The Lannister fleet, caught at anchor and unprepared for war, is destroyed in its berths. Those ships that manage to get underway are sunk by coordinated ramming attacks or overwhelmed by superior numbers. Within 6 hours, the naval power of the Westerlands ceases to exist. Simultaneously, Asher Greyjoy leads a smaller force against Bear Island. The seat of House Mormont has always been lightly defended, relying on its isolation for protection. That isolation becomes a weakness when Iron Island longships appear from the morning mist. The island's small garrison is overwhelmed, its modest fleet captured intact. But the most audacious strike is reserved for Theon himself. While his uncle and aunt attack obvious targets, he leads 40 ships against Seagard, the seat of House Mallister. This is the castle where his brother Roderick died 10 years ago, where Jason Mallister earned his reputation as a hero of the First Rebellion. Seagard should be impregnable from the sea. Its castle towers over the harbour, its walls bristle with catapults and scorpions. Any attacking fleet would be torn apart, trying to land troops under the castle's guns. Theon has no intention of attacking from the sea. His fleet approaches openly in the late afternoon, banners flying and horns sounding. Lord Jason Mallister sees them coming and prepares for the expected assault. Archers line the walls, engines of war are loaded and aimed. The harbour chain is raised to deny entry. What Lord Jason does not see is the second force of Iron Island raiders already hidden in the caves and ruins along the coastline, placed there by covert landings over the previous weeks. While the castle's attention focuses seaward, Theon's real assault comes from behind. The attack begins at midnight. While the defenders watch for ships that never come, 200 Iron Island warriors emerge from their hiding places and strike the castle from its landward side. The gates are opened from within by servants purchased with Dornish gold. The walls are scaled by men who know every stone from weeks of careful reconnaissance. Lord Jason Mallister dies in his own great hall, sword in hand, but overwhelmed by superior numbers. His son Patrick survives only because he is away serving as a squire in the capital. Sigard falls in a single night, and its capture announced by Iron Island banners raised over towers that have never known defeat. The news reaches King's Landing like wildfire spreading through dry timber. A coordinated Iron Island uprising, more sophisticated and dangerous than anything seen in living memory. Major ports burning simultaneously across hundreds of miles of coastline. A rebellion that strikes like lightning while the kingdom sleeps. King Robert Baratheon receives the reports in his solar, still wearing his hunting clothes from the morning's expedition. The parchments tremble in his hands as he reads account after account of Iron Island victories. This is not the desperate strike of a beaten people. This is warfare conducted by professionals. "How many ships do they have?" Robert demands of his small council. "Orth intelligence suggests at least 150 war galleys, Your Grace," Lord Varys reports. "Possibly more. They have been building in secret for years, apparently." 150? The first rebellion had maybe 60 ships at most. "Indeed, Your Grace. It appears we have significantly underestimated Iron Island capabilities." Robert's face darkens with more than anger. The stress of kingship has aged him poorly over the past decade. Too much wine, too much rich food, too little exercise beyond hunting. His breathing is labored even at rest, and news like this makes it worse. "Ned," he says to his hand, "you know these people. How do we stop them?" Lord Eddard Stark studies the reports with growing concern. This rebellion is unlike anything from his previous experience. The coordination, the intelligence, the systematic targeting of strategic assets, it all speaks to careful planning by someone who understands modern warfare. "The key is their fleet, Your Grace," Ned replies. "We must gather our own ships from every available source and meet them in open battle. But that will take time, and they know it." "How much time?" "Weeks, perhaps months, to assemble a force large enough to challenge them at sea." Robert slams his fist on the table, sending wine cups flying. "Months? They'll have overrun half the coastline by then." It is an accurate assessment. While the Royal Fleet marshals, Iron Island raiders strike at will along the western shores, villages burn, trade ships disappear, and panic spreads through ports from Old Town to White Harbour. The psychological impact rivals the physical damage. In the north, Ned Stark faces a particular challenge. His previous strategy for dealing with Iron Island rebellions relied on inside knowledge of their leadership. He understood Balon Greyjoy's character, his weaknesses and limitations. He also expected to have Theon as a source of intelligence about Iron Island plans and capabilities. Now that advantage is gone. Theon is not a conflicted hostage torn between two loyalties. He is a fully committed Iron Island war leader, whose tactical abilities far exceed anything his father displayed. The boy Ned might have raised at Winterfell has become a stranger, and a dangerous one. "Rob," Ned says to his 16-year-old heir, "ready the men. We march south to join with the king's forces. What about the coastline, father? They'll raid at will if we leave it undefended. They'll raid anyway. Our only hope is to gather enough strength to break their fleet entirely. But even as the northern army prepares to march, Theon strikes again. This time, his target is the shipping lanes that feed the North's economy. Merchant vessels carrying grain from White Harbor to the capital find themselves hunted by Iron Island raiders, using detailed intelligence gathered over years of careful observation. The economic warfare is as devastating as the military attacks. Trade grinds to a halt when merchants become too frightened to risk the journey. Prices for northern goods soar in King's Landing, while unsold harvests rot in northern warehouses. The Iron Islands have found a way to strangle their enemies without fighting major battles. King Robert's response is predictably direct. "Burn them out," he commands at a war council meeting. "To take every ship we have, sail to the Iron Islands, and burn every last one of their hovels to ash." "Your Grace," Lord Stannis objects, "a direct assault on the Iron Islands would be extremely costly. Their home waters are treacherous, their castles built on rocky crags. We would lose half our fleet just attempting to land troops." "Then what do you suggest? Let them raid our coasts forever?" It is Ned Stark who proposes the alternative strategy. "We force them to come to us, concentrate our fleets at key defensive positions, make them attack us where we are strongest, rather than chasing them where they are fastest. The plan has merit, but it requires patience and discipline, qualities that Robert Baratheon has never possessed in abundance. The stress of the rebellion, combined with his declining physical health, makes him increasingly erratic and difficult to manage. Meanwhile, in the Iron Islands, Theon's success brings unexpected challenges. Victory has made him more visible, and with visibility comes political complications. Some of the older Iron Island lords resent taking orders from someone they still think of as a boy. Others worry that his tactical innovations represent a departure from the traditional Iron Island way of war. "You fight like a Green Lander," Dagmar Cleftjaw tells him after a particularly successful raid. "All strategy and planning. Where's the glory in that?" "The glory is in winning," Theon replies. "Dead heroes don't hold castles or rule kingdoms." But he understands the tension. The Iron Island way has always emphasized individual courage and prowess over systematic planning. His approach, learned through years of careful study and hard experience, challenges cultural assumptions that go back centuries. The solution comes from an unexpected source. Alanis, his salt wife, suggests a compromise that preserves tradition while enabling innovation. "Let the older captains lead the raids for glory," she says. "You coordinate the overall campaign for victory. Honor both the old way and the new." It proves to be wise counsel. By allowing traditional Iron Island raiding culture to flourish within his broader strategic framework, Theon maintains the loyalty of his captains while achieving his military objectives. The raids continue, but now they serve larger purposes. As autumn turns to winter, the rebellion's initial success creates new opportunities and new dangers. The success brings recognition from potential allies who previously viewed the Iron Islands as irrelevant. Messages arrive from Dawn expressing interest in coordination. Similar communications come from disaffected lords in the Riverlands who have grown tired of Lannister dominance. But success also brings escalation. King Robert, despite his declining health, refuses to negotiate or compromise. He demands total victory, complete submission, and exemplary punishment for the rebels. The longer the rebellion continues, the more desperate his responses become. The war that began as a calculated bid for independence is transforming into something larger and more dangerous. The Iron Islands have proven they can strike anywhere along the western coast with impunity. Their fleets dominate the sea lanes. Their raids cripple enemy commerce and terrorize civilian populations. Yet Theon knows that this is only the beginning. The easy victories come from striking unprepared enemies with overwhelming force. Soon the mainland kingdoms will adapt, gather their strength, and respond with the full power of the realm. When that day comes, tactical brilliance, and strategic planning will face their ultimate test. Standing on the walls of captured Seaguard, watching his father's ships patrol waters that now belong to the Iron Islands, Theon Greyjoy reflects on how far they have come. The boy who chose loyalty over comfort has become the architect of the most successful Iron Island rebellion in history. But he also knows that the hardest battles still lie ahead. Robert Baratheon may be fat and lazy, but he is still the king who won the Iron Throne through war. Ned Stark may lack inside knowledge of Iron Island capabilities, but he remains one of the finest military minds in Westeros. The Kraken has awakened, and its tentacles reach across the narrow sea. But the wolf and the stag are stirring too, and their bite remains deadly. The real test of Theon's revolution is just beginning. The news reaches Pike on a cold morning in late autumn, carried by a raven bearing the royal seal. King Robert Baratheon is dead. The man who crushed the first Iron Island rebellion, who showed mercy when he could have shown steel, who grew fat and complacent in the years of peace, dead at 41, felled not by sword or spear, but by his own failing heart. Balon Greyjoy reads the message twice before speaking. Around him, or the great hall of Pike falls silent, as lords and captains wait for their king's response. Outside the windows, storm clouds gather over the iron-grey waters, as if the sea itself senses the momentous change sweeping across Westeros. "How?" Theon asks, taking the parchment from his father's hands. "Collapsed while planning our destruction," Balon replies with bitter satisfaction. The maesters say his heart gave out under the strain. Too much wine, too much rich food, too much stress from fighting wars he thought were beneath him. The irony is not lost on anyone present. Robert Baratheon, the warrior king who won the Iron Throne through strength of arms, brought low not by enemy action, but by the very rebellion he had tried to prevent through mercy. His decision to leave Theon in the Iron Islands, rather than taking him as a hostage, has led directly to this moment. "What of the succession?" asks Roderick Harlaw, ever the careful politician. "Prince Joffrey is crowned, naturally," Balon says, scanning the rest of the message. "But there are complications. Lord Stark questions the boy's legitimacy. Lord Stannis has sailed for Dragonstone with the royal fleet. The capital is in chaos." Theon's mind races through the implications. A succession crisis in King's Landing means divided attention, competing claims, lords choosing sides based on personal advantage rather than unified resistance to Iron Island independence. The realm's strength, so carefully built by Robert over nearly 2 decades of rule, fractures the moment his heart stops beating. "This changes everything," Theon says quietly. "Indeed it does," his father agrees. "Victarion, how many ships can you have ready to sail within the week?" 80 war galleys, my lord king. Maybe 90 if we strip the garrisons." Balon nods decisively. "Do it. We strike while they're distracted by their own quarrels. Theon, gather intelligence on which lords support which claimant. We'll need to know who our potential allies are." Within days, Iron Island ravens fly to every major house in Westeros. Not open declarations of alliance, but careful inquiries about mutual interests and shared grievances. The responses reveal a kingdom more divided than anyone realized. From Dorne comes word that Prince Doran Martell remains committed to their discreet correspondence, or hinting that continued Iron Island success might encourage more open cooperation. The Riverlands lords express frustration with Lannister dominance, though they stop short of outright rebellion. Even some northern houses suggest they might be willing to discuss autonomy arrangements if certain conditions were met. Most significantly, word comes from an unexpected source. Renly Baratheon, Robert's youngest brother, sends a coded message through intermediaries suggesting that multiple kings might be preferable to one illegitimate boy on the Iron Throne. The implication is clear. If the Baratheon brothers split their claim, neither will have strength to spare for distant Iron Island rebellions. But it is Tywin Lannister's response that proves most telling. The Hand of the King sends no message at all, which speaks louder than any words. So Lord Tywin is focused entirely on consolidating his grandson's hold on power, treating the Iron Island rebellion as a secondary concern to be dealt with after the succession is secured. That focus proves to be a critical mistake. While the great lords of Westeros maneuver for position in the coming civil war, Theon Greyjoy launches the most audacious operation of his career. Intelligence gathered over years of careful reconnaissance has revealed the supply lines that feed King's Landing. Merchant convoys carrying grain from the Reach, gold from the Westerlands, and weapons from the Riverlands, all following predictable routes through predictable waters. The largest of these convoys departs from Lannisport every month, carrying tribute and trade goods worth a king's ransom. Normally it would be protected by a substantial escort, but the chaos following Robert's death has disrupted normal schedules. Ships that should be guarding merchant vessels are instead positioned to support various claimants to the throne. Theon's plan is elegantly simple. 40 Iron Island longships, moving under cover of winter storms, intercept the convoy halfway between Lannisport and King's Landing. But this is not a simple raid for gold and goods. This is psychological warfare designed to demonstrate that the new king cannot protect his own supporters. The attack comes at dawn on a foggy morning, when visibility is limited to a few hundred yards. The convoy, 12 merchant vessels escorted by only 4 war galleys, never sees the Iron Island fleet until it is too late. The escorts are overwhelmed within minutes, their crews given the choice of surrender or drowning. If the merchant ships surrender without a fight, their captains are experienced enough to know that resistance means death, while compliance might mean survival. What they do not expect is the systematic efficiency of the Iron Island assault. "Strip everything of value," Theon orders his captains. "Gold, weapons, food, trade goods, everything. But leave the ships intact and the crews alive." "My lord?" Victarion questions. In the old way, captured ships would be burned and their crews killed or enslaved. "We're sending a message," Theon explains. "Dead men tell no tales. Live men spread stories." The psychological impact of the raid exceeds even Theon's expectations. When the empty ships limp into King's Landing with tales of Iron Island efficiency and mercy, the effect on court morale is devastating. The new king cannot protect his own trade routes. The realm's enemies show more discipline and professionalism than the realm's defenders. Worse still, the raiders could have killed everyone, but chose not to. A demonstration of strength, more intimidating than any massacre. King Joffrey's response is predictably childish and counterproductive. He declares that all Iron Islanders are traitors and pirates who should be hunted down like wild animals. He offers rewards for Iron Island heads and threatens to burn Pike to the ground. The proclamation makes him sound desperate rather than strong, exactly the impression Balon hopes to create. Meanwhile, Lord Tywin Lannister finds himself fighting a war on multiple fronts. The succession crisis has emboldened enemies throughout the realm. Lord Stannis marshals supporters on Dragonstone. Renly gathers strength in the south. The north remains under Stark control, but shows signs of restiveness. And now the Iron Islands control the western seas while openly mocking royal authority. "We cannot fight everyone at once," Tywin tells the small council during an emergency session. "The Iron Island rebellion must wait until we secure the capital and eliminate more immediate threats." It is exactly the response Balon hoped for. By striking during the succession crisis, he has ensured that the Iron Islands will be treated as a secondary concern rather than an existential threat. The kingdom's resources will be devoted to civil war, while Iron Island's strength continues to grow. Theon uses this breathing space to accelerate his expansion plans. If the mainland kingdoms are too distracted to stop him, he will seize as much territory as possible before they can respond effectively. The strategy is aggressive but calculated. Take what can be held, fortify it quickly, and dare enemies to attack prepared positions rather than fighting on terms they dictate. The first target is the western coast of the north. While Ned Stark deals with succession politics in King's Landing, Iron Island forces launch coordinated assaults on Deepwood Motte, Torrens Square, and Moat Kylan. These are not raids, but conquest, permanent occupation of strategic positions that can anchor future operations. Deepwood Motte falls within days, its small garrison overwhelmed by superior numbers and caught completely by surprise. Torrens Square holds out longer, but eventually succumbs when its water supply is cut off. Most significantly, the Moat Kylan, the ancient fortress that guards the neck, is taken through a combination of amphibious assault and local treachery. The capture of Moat Kylan is particularly significant because it cuts the north off from the rest of the kingdom. No army can march north through the neck while Iron Island forces hold the ancient stronghold. For the first time in 300 years, the north is effectively isolated from southern assistance. Word of these victories reaches Pike just as the first reports arrive of open warfare between royal forces and Stannis Baratheon's fleet. The realm is tearing itself apart while Iron Island power grows daily. Balon's gamble, striking during the succession crisis rather than waiting for stability, has paid dividends beyond his boldest dreams. "Ought we control the western seas from Old Town to the Wall?" Theon reports to his father's war council. "Our forces hold strategic positions throughout the north. Trade routes are disrupted, royal revenues are declining, and the new king appears weak and ineffective." "What of opposition?" asks Theon Greyjoy. "Surely someone will move against us soon." "Lord Stark remains focused on the succession question," Theon replies. "Lord Tywin cannot spare forces while fighting Stannis and Renly simultaneously. The northern lords are isolated behind Moat Kylan and lack the ships to challenge us at sea. It is a strategic situation unprecedented in Iron Island history. For the first time, they are winning not through desperate courage or reckless bravery, but through superior planning and political timing. The old way of taking the Iron Price through strength alone has evolved into something more sophisticated and more dangerous. But Theon knows that this window of opportunity will not remain open forever. Eventually, the succession crisis will resolve itself one way or another. When that happens, the full attention of the realm will turn toward the Iron Islands. They must be ready for that test, strong enough to survive whatever storm follows. "Father," he says privately after the council meeting ends, "we need to accelerate our alliance negotiations. Dorne, the discontented Riverlands lords, perhaps even some northern houses who feel abandoned by their liege lord. If we face the full might of the realm alone, we'll lose eventually." Balon considers this carefully. His son has grown into a strategist worthy of respect. But alliance building requires compromises that go against Iron Island traditions. The old way says, trust no one outside your own people. Take what you need by force, and let enemies fear your strength rather than question your promises. "What kind of alliances?" Balon asks. "Mutual defense pacts, coordinated military action, perhaps even marriage ties with major houses. Whatever it takes to ensure we're not fighting alone when the time comes." The conversation continues late into the night, father and son weighing the benefits of cooperation against the risks of dependence. By dawn, they have reached a decision that will reshape the political landscape of Westeros. The Iron Islands will no longer fight as pirates or raiders seeking temporary advantage. They will fight as a kingdom seeking permanent independence. They're willing to make the alliances and compromises necessary for survival. The boy who stayed with his father, instead of going to Winterfell, has become the architect of a revolution that threatens the very foundations of royal authority. King Robert is dead. His kingdom fractures along ancient fault lines. In the chaos, the Iron Islands have grown from defeated rebels to serious contenders for power. The boar that killed a king has given birth to a kraken that may yet devour the realm itself. Standing on the walls of Pike, watching his father's ships patrol waters that now belong to them by right of conquest, Theon Greyjoy reflects on how much has changed since that day, 10 years ago, when he chose loyalty over comfort. The decision to stay with his people instead of becoming a hostage has led to this moment, the Iron Islands, stronger and more independent than they have been in centuries. But he also knows that the greatest challenges still lie ahead. Robert Baratheon was fat and lazy, but he was still a warrior king who commanded respect. His successors are untested boys and ambitious lords whose claims rest on legal technicalities rather than proven strength. When the succession crisis ends, when someone sits securely on the Iron Throne, that person will remember the Iron Islands' defiance during the realm's moment of weakness. They will remember the burned harbors, the captured castles, the trade convoys taken like prizes. And they will demand payment in blood. The Iron Islands must be ready for that reckoning. The revolution Theon has helped build must prove it can survive not just opportunistic strikes against divided enemies, but sustained warfare against a unified realm determined to restore royal authority. The Kraken has grown large and strong, its tentacles reaching across half of Westeros. But Krakens, even mighty ones, can still be slain by those brave enough and skilled enough to find their weak points. The real test of Theon's revolution is about to begin. Winter's grip tightens on the Iron Islands as Theon Greyjoy prepares for the ceremony that will change the course of Westeros forever. The Great Hall of Pike has been restored to its ancient glory, the seastone chair polished until it gleams like black water under torchlight. And lords from every major island have gathered to witness their king claim a crown not seen for 300 years. The crown itself is a masterwork of ancient craftsmanship, recovered from the deepest vaults of Pike, where it has waited since Aegon's conquest. Carved from a single piece of driftwood, blackened by centuries of salt and sea, set with pearls from the deepest waters, and gold taken in the iron price, it speaks of a time when the Iron Islands bowed to no mainland king. Theon stands at his father's side as the ceremony begins, but his mind is elsewhere. 3 days ago, a raven arrived from Winterfell bearing unexpected news. Young Robb Stark, isolated behind Moat Cailin and cut off from southern assistance, has sent a proposal that could reshape the political landscape of the realm. "To our lords of the Iron Islands," the drowned god's priest intones, his voice echoing in the restored hall. "Behold your king, chosen by salt and sea, crowned by the blessing of he who dwells beneath the waves." The crown settles on Balon's grey head like it was made for him. Perhaps it was. For the first time in 3 centuries, an Iron Island king sits the seastone chair with a crown of his own, making, rather than one, granted by mainland authority. The symbolism is not lost on anyone present. "Rise, King Balon of House Greyjoy, Lord Reaper of Pike, King of the Iron Islands and the North," the priest declares. The hall erupts in cheers, but Theon notices the careful phrasing. King of the Iron Islands and the North, not King of the Iron Islands ruling over a conquered North, but sharing dominion with another power. But it is a distinction that will prove crucial in the days to come. After the ceremony, father and son retire to Balon's Solar to discuss the Stark proposal in detail. The message from Winterfell is written in Robb Stark's own hand, its contents both surprising and strategically brilliant. "He proposes an alliance," Theon explains, spreading the letter on his father's desk. "Northern independence under Stark rule, Iron Island independence under Greyjoy rule, combined opposition to Lannister power." Balon frowns as he reads. "The boy offers us nothing we haven't already taken." "He offers legitimacy," Theon counters, "recognition from the North's ancient lords, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. More importantly, he offers coordination against our enemies." The proposal is more sophisticated than either Greyjoy expected from a 16-year-old lord. Robb Stark may be young, but he understands the realities of his position. Isolated behind Moat Cailin, cut off from royal support, facing potential threats from multiple directions, he needs allies more than he needs pride. The alliance terms are surprisingly generous. The Iron Islands keep all territory conquered during the rebellion. The North recognizes Iron Island independence and agrees to permanent peace between the kingdoms. In exchange, the Iron Islands provide naval support for northern independence and coordinate military action against shared enemies. Most significantly, the proposal includes a joint campaign against the Westerlands. While royal forces remain distracted by the succession crisis, combined Iron Island and Northern armies would strike at the heart of Lannister power. The psychological and strategic impact of such cooperation would be devastating to the new king's authority. The boy has courage, Balon admits after reading the entire proposal. But can we trust him? We don't have to trust him, Theon replies. We just have to share common interests. As long as the Lannisters threaten both our kingdoms, we have reasons to work together. The negotiations take place on neutral ground. Moat Cailin, the ancient fortress that now serves as the border between Iron Island and Northern Territory. Theon leads the Iron Island delegation, accompanied by his uncle Victarion and a dozen picked men. Robb Stark arrives with his own advisors, including the Blackfish and several northern lords whose faces reflect skepticism about treating with Iron Island reavers. The meeting takes place in the ruins of the Great Hall, surrounded by the ghosts of ancient kings and the memories of battles fought when the world was younger. It seems fitting that two young lords, each trying to carve out independence from the chaos of civil war, should meet in a place that has seen so much history. Lord Theon, Robb says, by way of greeting. There is respect in his voice, but also wariness. These two might have been foster brothers in another timeline. Instead, they are potential allies brought together by necessity. Lord Robb, Theon replies, I confess surprise at your proposal. Most lords would seek to reclaim their stolen castles, not legitimize their theft. Robb's slight smile suggests he appreciates the directness. Most lords have the luxury of royal support. I have the reality of isolation and the intelligence to recognize a changing world. The negotiations that follow are unlike anything in Iron Island history. Instead of demanding tribute or submission, Theon finds himself discussing trade routes, mutual defense obligations, and coordinate military strategies. It is diplomacy, conducted between equals, each offering something the other needs. The key breakthrough comes when Robb proposes joint action against a specific target. Casterly Rock, he says, pointing to a map spread across the ruined table. The heart of Lannister power, supposedly impregnable from land or sea, but not from both simultaneously. Theon studies the proposal with growing excitement. A combined amphibious assault by Iron Island forces while northern armies approach overland. The castle's defenders would be forced to fight on two fronts, unable to concentrate their strength against either threat. It would take months of preparation, Theon observes. Perfect coordination between our forces, detailed intelligence about the castle's defenses. I have contacts in the Westerlands, Robb replies. Lords who have grown tired of Tywin's dominance, merchants who would profit from Lannister weakness. With Iron Island naval power and northern land forces, we could achieve something neither could manage alone. The alliance that emerges from these negotiations is unprecedented in Westerosi history. The Stark Greyjoy Pact, designed in the shadow of Moat Cailin's ancient towers, creates two independent kingdoms bound by mutual interest and common enemies. More importantly, it legitimizes Iron Island conquests through recognition by one of the oldest and most respected houses in the realm. Word of the alliance spreads quickly, and reactions are swift and predictable. King Joffrey declares both Robb Stark and Balon Greyjoy traitors to the realm, offering rewards for their heads. Lord Tywin realizes that his western strongholds face a coordinated threat from both land and sea. Other lords begin to calculate whether two independent kingdoms might offer better terms than one increasingly unstable realm. But the alliance also creates unexpected tensions within the Iron Islands themselves. But not all Iron Island lords are comfortable with Theon's diplomatic innovations. and the most vocal opposition comes from an unexpected source. Asha Greyjoy, Theon's sister and a proven war leader in her own right, confronts her brother after the Moat Cailin negotiations conclude. They meet on the deck of her longship, the Black Wind, as it cuts through the choppy waters between the mainland and Pike. "Alliance with the Starks?" she says, without preamble. "Treaties and trade agreements? You sound more like a merchant than a reaver." Theon expected this conversation, but hoped to delay it. Asha represents the traditional Iron Island way of thinking. Take what you need, trust no one outside your own people, and let strength speak louder than words. "I sound like someone who wants to win," he replies. "'Cause the old way brought us defeat and humiliation. The new way brings us victory and independence." "The old way brought us pride," Asha counters. "We paid the iron price for everything we took. Now you want to legitimize our conquests through green land politics?" "I want to keep our conquests. There's a difference." The argument that follows reflects deeper tensions within Iron Island society. Theon's innovations have brought unprecedented success, but they challenge cultural assumptions that go back generations. The idea of permanent alliance with mainland lords, of diplomatic recognition and trade agreements, feels foreign to people raised on stories of independence through strength alone. "The men follow you because you win battles," Asha says finally. But winning battles isn't the same as winning hearts. You'll push too far from the old ways, and you'll find yourself leading strangers instead of Iron Islanders. It is a warning Theon takes seriously. That evening, he convenes a gathering of Iron Island captains to address their concerns directly. The meeting takes place in Pike's Great Hall, now dominated by the sight of Balon, wearing his ancient crown. "Some of you question our alliance with the North," Theon begins. "You wonder if we're abandoning the old ways in favor of green land politics." Murmurs of agreement ripple through the assembled captains. These are men who have followed Theon through years of successful raids, who have seen his strategies bring victory after victory. But they are also traditionalists who value Iron Island independence above all else. "Let me be clear," Theon continues. "We ally with the North, not because we need their permission to exist, but because we choose to coordinate our strength with theirs. We are not asking for legitimacy. We are offering cooperation between equals." The distinction is subtle but important. Iron Island culture can accept alliance between strong powers, but not subordination to mainland authority. By framing the Stark-Greyjoy Pact as coordination rather than recognition, Theon preserves traditional concepts while enabling innovative strategies. "What of the Iron Price?" asks Dagmar Cleftjaw, one of the oldest and most respected captains. "Do we now pay green land gold for what we could take with steel?" "We pay nothing," Theon replies firmly. "The North offers us trade because they profit from it, not because we beg for it. And they recognize our independence because they need our alliance, not because we require their approval." The explanation satisfies most concerns, but Theon knows the underlying tension remains. He is walking a careful line between innovation and tradition, between strategic necessity and cultural identity. Push too far in either direction, and he risks losing either effectiveness or support. Over the following weeks, the alliance begins to show practical results. Iron Island shipbuilders, working with northern timber and gold, begin construction of a new type of vessel, warships designed specifically for coordinated land-sea operations. Northern lords provide detailed intelligence about Lannister strongholds, while Iron Island scouts map coastal approaches and harbor defenses. Most importantly, the psychological impact of the alliance extends far beyond the two kingdoms directly involved. Other lords begin to question whether the Iron Throne can maintain authority over kingdoms that prefer independence and mutual cooperation to royal dominance. From Dorne comes word that Prince Doran Martell watches developments with great interest. The Riverlands lords express increasing dissatisfaction with Lannister rule. Even some houses in the Vale begin discreet inquiries about the terms under which independent kingdoms might coexist. But it is Tywin Lannister's response that proves most revealing. Instead of dismissing the alliance as a temporary arrangement between desperate enemies, the Hand of the King begins systematic preparation for a two-front war. New fortifications are ordered for western castles. The Lannister fleet is expanded and repositioned. Most significantly, Tywin begins negotiations with foreign mercenary companies, suggesting he expects a prolonged conflict. "He takes us seriously," Theon observes during a war council at Pike. "That's progress from being dismissed as pirates and rebels." "Serious enough to hire sellswords," Victarion adds. "The Golden Company has landed in Lannisport, 20,000 men with no loyalty except to gold." The escalation is exactly what Theon expected, but it also validates his strategy. By forcing Tywin to hire expensive mercenaries and fortify against coordinated attacks, the alliance has already achieved significant strategic objectives. The Lannisters are spending treasure they cannot afford to replace, weakening themselves even before battle is joined. As winter deepens and spring approaches, the Iron Islands find themselves in an unprecedented position. They are not just independent, they are respected, feared, and courted by powers throughout the realm. The alliance with the North has provided legitimacy without surrender, cooperation without subordination. Theon Greyjoy, wearing his ancient crown in the restored throne room of Pike, receives ambassadors from kingdoms that once dismissed the Iron Islands as irrelevant. Trade agreements are negotiated, military coordination is planned, and the future of Westeros is reshaped by decisions made in salt-stained halls surrounded by grey waters. But Theon knows that the real test is still coming. The alliance with the North has bought time and legitimacy, but it has also painted targets on both kingdoms. When Tywin Lannister strikes back, and he will strike back, the coordinate response must be flawless. Any failure will not only doom the alliance, but validate every traditionalist who questioned Theon's innovations. Standing on the walls of Pike, watching his father's crown flash in the winter sunlight, as Balon receives another delegation of mainland lords, Theon reflects on how far they have come. The boy who chose loyalty over comfort has become the architect of his people's transformation from defeated rebels to independent power. The Iron Islands have achieved something unprecedented: victory without dishonor, independence without isolation, strength through alliance, rather than dominance through fear. But maintaining that achievement will require all the skill, courage, and political wisdom that Theon has learned in his 20 years of life. The crown of salt and sea rests securely on his father's head. The question is whether it will still be there when the storms of war finally break over the Seven Kingdoms. Spring comes early to the Sunset Sea, and with it comes the largest coordinated assault in Iron Island history. 200 war galleys cut through the morning mist, their black sails bearing the golden kraken of House Greyjoy. Behind them, transport ships carry siege engines and supplies for the most audacious campaign ever attempted by the Children of the Sea. Theon stands on the deck of his flagship, the Iron Victory, watching the coastline of the Westerlands emerge from the dawn haze. Beside him, Robb Stark adjusts his armor with the nervous energy of a young commander facing his greatest test. The alliance forged at Moat Cailin is about to prove itself in blood and steel. "Your men are in position?" Theon asks, though he already knows the answer. They have planned this assault for months, coordinating every detail through ravens and secret meetings. 3,000 Northerners, hidden in the hills above Casterly Rock, Robb confirms. "When your ships appear in the harbour, we'll strike from the landward side. Lord Tywin will have to choose which threat to face first." It is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that has made their alliance so effective. Neither force is strong enough to take Casterly Rock alone, but together they can divide the defenders' attention and create opportunities that neither could exploit individually. The first phase of the assault unfolds with mechanical precision. Iron Island longships race ahead of the main fleet, their crews setting fire to the outer harbor's defensive installations while war galleys move into bombardment positions. The great chain that protects Lannisport Harbor is cut by swimmers who have trained for months for this specific task. From the landward side, the crash of northern war horns echoes off the rocks as Robb's forces surge down from their hidden positions. The coordination is perfect, exactly as the two young commanders planned during their long nights of strategic discussion. But it is in the city itself that Theon first witnesses something that will haunt him for years to come. The assault on Lannisport proceeds exactly according to plan. The harbour defences crumble under coordinated attack. The Lannister fleet is trapped and destroyed at anchor, and Iron Island raiders pour into the city while northern forces engage the castle garrison. Victory seems assured within the first hour of fighting. Then Theon sees his men at work in the narrow streets of the port district. The Iron Island way of war has always been brutal, but Theon has spent years insulated from its worst aspects by his focus on strategy and command. Now, following his raiders into the heart of a conquered city, he sees what the iron price really means for those who pay it. An Iron Island axeman splits the skull of an unarmed merchant who tried to protect his shop. The raiders drag screaming women from their homes while their children watch in terror. A group of his own men compete to see who can kill the most city guards, laughing as they pile bodies in the market square. "This is what victory looks like," Dagmar Cleftjaw says, appearing at Theon's side with blood on his beard and satisfaction in his eyes. The strong take from the weak, as the drowned god intended. Theon watches a young mother clutch her infant child, while Iron Island reavers debate whether to kill them quickly or save them for slaves. The woman's eyes meet his across the smoke-filled square, and he sees something there that stops him cold. Not hatred or fear, but resigned understanding. She knows she is about to die, and she accepts it as the price of living in a world where strength matters more than mercy. "Enough," Theon says quietly. "My lord?" Dagmar asks, uncertain he heard correctly. "I said enough." Theon's voice carries the authority of years of successful command. "Secure the harbour and the warehouses. Round up prisoners for ransom, but no more killing of civilians." Dagmar's face shows confusion, then concern. "My lord, they're green landers. They exist to serve the strong or die trying." "They exist to pay taxes and provide tribute," Theon corrects. "Dead merchants don't buy our goods. Dead craftsmen don't make things we need. We're here to conquer, not to butcher." The order spreads through the Iron Island forces with grudging compliance. These men have followed Theon through years of successful raids, and they trust his judgment even when they don't understand his reasoning. But Theon can see the confusion in their eyes, and the questions about whether their young lord has grown soft. The confusion deepens when Robb Stark arrives with the northern prisoners taken from Casterly Rock's outer defences. The contrast between the two forces is stark and telling. Where Iron Island raiders drag bound captives and loot through the streets, northern soldiers maintain formation and discipline even in victory. "Any word from Lord Tywin?" Robb asks, as they meet in Lannisport's captured harbour master's office. "Fled inland with the castle garrison," Theon replies. "Left the city to fend for itself rather than risk a siege." It is a victory more complete than either young commander dared hope. Casterly Rock itself remains unconquered, built on stone too high and strong for assault. But Lannisport, the port that feeds the castle's wealth, or the harbour that projects its power, now belongs to their alliance. Over the following days, as they organize the occupation and prepare for Tywin's inevitable counterattack, Theon finds himself spending more time with his northern allies than his own men. The difference in military culture becomes impossible to ignore. Where Iron Island forces see conquest as license for brutality, northern soldiers maintain discipline and order. Where his men compete for the most valuable loot, Robb's forces follow systematic procedures for inventorying and distributing captured supplies. Most significantly, where Iron Islanders treat civilian populations as natural enemies to be exploited or eliminated, Northerners see them as potential subjects to be protected and governed. "Your men are different from what I expected," Theon tells Robb during one of their evening strategy sessions. They stand on the walls of the harbour fort, watching their combined fleets patrol the conquered waters below. "Different how?" Robb asks. "More controlled. My men see victory as permission to take whatever they want. Yours see it as responsibility to maintain order." Robb considers this carefully. At 17, he has grown into the role of military commander with remarkable speed, but he still possesses the thoughtfulness that comes from good counsel and careful upbringing. "My father taught me that conquest without governance is just expensive raiding," he says finally. "What's the point of taking territory if you can't hold it? What's the value of victory if it makes your enemies more determined to resist you?" It is a perspective that challenges assumptions Theon has carried since childhood. The Iron Island way has always emphasized taking over holding, raiding over ruling, the immediate satisfaction of conquest over the long-term benefits of administration. But watching Robb's forces integrate captured territory into a functioning system of control, Theon begins to understand the limitations of his people's traditional approach. The revelation becomes more pointed when he encounters Jane Westerling. She is the daughter of a minor Westerlands lord, captured when northern forces overran her family's small keep on their approach to Casterly Rock. By rights of conquest, she should be a hostage held for ransom or a prize awarded to some deserving captain. Instead, Robb has placed her under the protection of his personal guard and treated her with the courtesy due to her rank. Theon meets her while inspecting the prisoners' quarters, expecting to find the usual collection of terrified captives awaiting their fate. Instead, he finds an organized camp where prisoners receive regular meals, medical attention, and protection from abuse. Jane sits in the shade of a pavilion, reading a book while two northern guards ensure her safety. "You're Theon Greyjoy," she says when he approaches. It is not a question. "Lady Jane," he replies, uncertain of the proper protocol. Iron Island tradition offers no guidance for polite conversation with female hostages. "I wanted to thank you," she continues, closing her book and meeting his eyes directly. "Your order to spare civilians saved many lives in the city." The comment catches him off guard. He expected fear, perhaps hatred, possibly an attempt at seduction designed to improve her situation. He did not expect gratitude for what seemed like basic military discipline. "Any commander would have done the same," he says automatically. Her slight smile suggests she knows better. Perhaps, but not every commander did. Over the following days, as the combined forces consolidate their hold on Lannisport and prepare for the next phase of their campaign, Theon finds himself returning to speak with Jane Westerling. Their conversations begin with military necessity. She has valuable intelligence about Westerland's defenses and political alliances, but gradually evolve into something more complex. She challenges his assumptions about the Iron Island way of life with questions that seem innocent but cut to the heart of cultural differences. Why do Iron Islanders pride themselves on taking rather than making? What honor is there in strength that preys only on the weak? How can a people claim to follow the sea's wisdom while ignoring the sea's patience? "The sea takes what it needs," Theon explains during one of these discussions, "but it also gives back. Tides flow in both directions." "Yet your people only seem to take," she observes. "When did the Iron Islands last give something to the mainland that wasn't forced from them by defeat?" The question has no easy answer. Iron Island culture has grown so focused on resistance and independence that it has forgotten how to contribute to the larger world beyond its shores. The realization is uncomfortable, but it also suggests possibilities that Theon has never considered. Meanwhile, the military situation continues to evolve in their favor. Lord Tywin, denied the resources of Lannisport and facing threats on multiple fronts, begins a strategic withdrawal toward the eastern strongholds of the Westerlands. His forces remain dangerous. but they are now reactive rather than proactive, responding to allied initiatives rather than dictating the terms of engagement. The psychological impact of the victory extends far beyond the immediate military consequences. Word spreads throughout Westeros that the combined forces of the North and Iron Islands have accomplished what seemed impossible. They have broken Lannister power in the west and forced the most feared military commander in the realm into defensive positions. Other lords begin to recalculate their allegiances. If Tywin Lannister can be defeated, if his strongholds can be taken, if his fleets can be destroyed, then perhaps the new king's authority is not as absolute as it appeared. Ravens fly between castles throughout the realm as nobles weigh the costs and benefits of continued loyalty to a crown that seems unable to protect its most important supporters. But for Theon, the most significant changes are personal rather than political. The conversations with Jane Westerling, the observations of northern military discipline, of the contrast between Iron Island brutality and mainland governance, all of it forces him to examine assumptions he has never questioned. He remains loyal to his father and his people. The Iron Islands deserve independence, and their grievances against royal authority are legitimate. But he also begins to understand that independence without wisdom, strength without restraint, and victory without mercy create their own forms of weakness. The revelation comes to a head during the assault on the Golden Tooth, the mountain fortress that controls the eastern approach to the Westerlands. The combined forces take the castle after a brief siege, and once again Theon finds himself watching Iron Island raiders at work in a conquered stronghold, this time when he sees his men preparing to execute captured defenders who have already surrendered. He acts without hesitation. "Stand down," he orders, placing himself between the kneeling prisoners and the raised axes of his warriors. "My lord," one of the raiders protests, "they fought against us. The iron price." "The iron price is paid by those who resist, not by those who surrender," Theon interrupts. "These men yielded honorably. They will be treated as prisoners of war, not as sacrifices to our victory." The confrontation draws attention from both Iron Island and Northern forces. Robb Stark watches from across the courtyard as Theon faces down his own men over a question of battlefield mercy. The Northern lords nod approvingly, while some Iron Island captains mutter about Greenland softness. "You're changing," Asha tells him that evening as they stand together on the walls of the captured fortress, "that the old Theon would have let them take the iron price. The old Theon was a boy who knew only one way of doing things," he replies. "I'm learning there might be others. And if the men lose faith in you, if they decide you're more Greenlander than Iron Islander?" It is the question that haunts him. Leadership requires the confidence of followers, and Iron Island culture has very specific expectations about what strength looks like. By showing mercy, by restraining traditional practices, by working closely with mainland allies, Theon risks being seen as weak or corrupted. "Then I'll have to prove that mercy can be its own kind of strength," he says finally. As spring turns towards summer and the combined forces prepare for their next campaign, Theon Greyjoy stands at a crossroads. The alliance with the North has brought military success beyond his father's wildest dreams. The Iron Islands are respected and feared throughout Westeros, their independence secured through strength of arms and political acumen. But success has also brought knowledge, and knowledge has brought complexity. The world is larger and more nuanced than the simple certainties of his youth. Strength matters, but so does wisdom. Independence is valuable, but so is cooperation. The iron price can be paid in many currencies, and not all of them require blood. Standing on the conquered walls of the Golden Tooth, watching his father's banners fly beside the dire wolf of House Stark, Theon reflects on how far they have come. The boy who chose loyalty over comfort has become a man who must choose between tradition and growth, or between the certainty of the past and the possibilities of the future. The tide has indeed turned, bringing victory and independence to the Iron Islands. But tides flow in both directions, and the currents that have carried them to triumph may yet carry them toward challenges they have never imagined. The Iron Islands are no longer isolated and defeated. They are part of a larger world, with all the opportunities and responsibilities that entails. The question now is whether they can adapt to that reality while remaining true to their essential nature, or whether success will ultimately cost them their identity. For Theon Greyjoy, the answer to that question will define not just his own future, but the future of his people and his kingdom. The Raven arrives at Pike on a clear summer morning, is bearing news that will reshape the Game of Thrones forever. Maester Windermere reads the message twice before climbing the tower stairs to King Balon's solar, his face pale with the implications of what he has learned. "Your Grace," the Maester says, his voice carefully controlled. "We have received word from our contacts in the Narrow Sea. Daenerys Targaryen has returned to Westeros." Balon Greyjoy looks up from the charts spread across his desk, maps showing Iron Island territories and allied positions throughout the Western Kingdoms. At 60, the King of the Iron Islands has grown comfortable with his success, confident that the combined power of his fleet and the Northern Alliance can handle any threat the mainland kingdoms might marshal. "Robert's brother already tried to press a Targaryen claim," Balon says dismissively. "That one more pretender changes nothing. The dragons are dead, and the Targaryen line is broken." "That's just it, Your Grace," Windermere continues, his voice barely above a whisper. "The reports say she has dragons. 3 of them, fully grown." The chart room falls silent, except for the sound of wind through the tower windows and the distant crash of waves against Pike's ancient stones. Balon's face shows the progression of emotions that comes with understanding a new and unprecedented threat. Disbelief first, then calculation, then the first cold touch of fear. "Impossible," Balon says finally. "Dragons have been dead for over a century. These are just stories, exaggerations meant to frighten simple folk." But Theon, who has been studying the coastal defense reports in the corner of the room, looks up with a different expression entirely. Where his father sees impossible tales, Theon sees the logical evolution of their strategic situation. For months, the Iron Islands have dominated the seas through superior ships and tactics. If dragons truly exist, the dominance becomes meaningless overnight. "Father," Theon says carefully, "perhaps we should take these reports seriously. Even if they're exaggerated, any threat to our naval supremacy requires careful consideration." "Our naval supremacy." Balon's voice carries the edge that appears whenever he feels his authority questioned. "Boy, we have 200 ships and the finest sailors in the world. What could 3 overgrown lizards do against the Iron Fleet?" The answer comes sooner than anyone expects. 3 days later, a patrol of Iron Island longships operating near Dragonstone encounters something that changes warfare forever. Captain Ralph Kenning commands a squadron of 5 vessels conducting routine reconnaissance when the attack comes from above. The dragon appears out of the morning sun like a nightmare given wings. Balerion reborn, black as night and larger than the largest war galley, breathing fire that turns seawater to steam and iron to molten slag. The first ship dies in seconds, its crew incinerated before they can even scream. The second manages to loose a flight of arrows that bounce harmlessly off armored scales before meeting the same fate. Only one ship escapes to bring word back to Pike, and Captain Kenning arrives more dead than alive, his face burned and his mind shattered by what he has witnessed. "The size of a castle," he whispers to the assembled war council, his hands shaking as he tries to describe the indescribable. "Fire that melts iron and boils the sea. We hit it with everything we had, and our arrows just bounced off." The great hall erupts in shocked murmurs and fearful speculation, but Balon slams his fist on the table to restore order. "1 dragon against 5 ships, he declares. Bad odds for the ships, but there are limits to what even dragons can do. We have 200 vessels. They cannot burn them all. But Theon is already thinking beyond the immediate tactical implications. If dragons can destroy ships at will, then every assumption about naval warfare becomes obsolete. Or the Iron Islands' entire strategic advantage, their ability to strike anywhere along the coast while remaining safe at sea, disappears the moment dragons control the skies. We need to consider our options carefully, Theon says to the council. This changes the fundamental nature of the conflict. What options? Theon Greyjoy demands. We're Iron Islanders. We fight. Against what? Theon replies. Dragons fly higher and move faster than our ships. They breathe fire hot enough to melt castle walls. Traditional naval tactics are useless against them. The debate that follows reveals deep divisions within Iron Island leadership. The traditionalists, led by Victarion and supported by many of the older captains, argue for immediate offensive action. Strike fast and hard, to overwhelm the Dragon Queen with numbers before she can consolidate her position. It is the Iron Island way, courage over caution, action over analysis. But a growing faction, influenced by years of Theon's successful innovations, argues for a more measured approach. Study the enemy, understand their capabilities and limitations, then adapt tactics accordingly. Simply charging into dragonfire serves no purpose except to die gloriously, while accomplishing nothing. The boy speaks wisdom, Roderick Harlaw says, breaking a long silence. As one of the most respected lords in the islands, his opinion carries weight. We have succeeded by being smarter than our enemies, not just braver. This requires the same approach. Balon's face darkens at the implied criticism. For 20 years he has led the Iron Islands through defeat, humiliation, recovery, and ultimate triumph. Now his own lords suggest that his approach is inadequate for the new threat they face. "And what would you have us do?" Balon asks, his voice dangerously quiet. "Bow to this girl because she has flying pets? Beg for mercy from someone who was suckling at her wet nurse's teat when we were fighting Robert Baratheon? I would have us consider alliance," Theon says, the words falling into the hall like stones into still water. The reaction is immediate and explosive. Half the captains shout outrage, while the other half demand explanation. Victarion reaches for his axe, while Aeron mutters prayers to the drowned god. Only Balon remains silent, his eyes fixed on his son with an expression of dangerous calculation. "Explain yourself," Balon commands when the noise subsides. Theon takes a deep breath, or knowing that his next words will either save or doom his people. Daenerys Targaryen represents the greatest military innovation in 3 centuries. Fighting her is like fighting the tide. You may win individual battles, but the sea always returns. Instead of opposing her, we should ally with her. Ally with a Targaryen, Victarion spits. The same house that conquered us 300 years ago. The same house that might conquer us again if we oppose them, Theon replies. But alliance offers mutual benefit. She needs naval support to secure her conquest. We need protection from dragons while we consolidate our own independence. The strategic logic is sound, but it challenges every cultural assumption the Iron Islands hold dear. Iron Islanders do not submit to mainland rulers. They do not seek protection from foreign queens. They pay the iron price for everything they take, and they bow to no one except the drowned god. "You would have us trade our independence for her protection?" Balon asks. "I would have us secure our independence through intelligent alliance rather than lose it through glorious defeat." The argument continues through the day and into the night, with messengers arriving regularly to report dragon sightings throughout the Narrow Sea. Each report confirms Theon's strategic assessment. The dragons are real, they are devastating in battle, and they represent a threat unlike anything the Iron Islands have ever faced. But cultural resistance proves stronger than strategic logic. Lord after lord stands to speak against alliance with the Dragon Queen, invoking tradition, honor, and the independence that defines Iron Island identity. Or the idea of voluntary cooperation with a Targaryen restoration strikes at the very heart of who they believe themselves to be. "We are Iron Islanders," Dagmar Cleftjaw declares in a speech that draws cheers from the assembled captains. "We bow to no king, kneel to no queen, and pay tribute to no throne. If this dragon girl wants our submission, let her come and take it. We'll show her what the iron price really means." The vote, when it finally comes, is closer than Balon expected, but decisive nonetheless. The Iron Islands will not seek alliance with Daenerys Targaryen. Instead, they will prepare for war against dragons, adapting their tactics and strategies to meet this new threat through strength rather than submission. But the decision creates fault lines within Iron Island society that run deeper than simple tactical disagreement. For the first time since his return from exile, Theon finds himself on the losing side of a major strategic debate. More troubling, he recognizes that his father's decision, however culturally satisfying, may doom their people to destruction. The next morning brings word that validates Theon's concerns. A full squadron of Iron Island warships attempting to raid the Targaryen supply lines encounters all 3 dragons simultaneously. 20 ships and their entire crews are destroyed in a battle that lasts less than an hour. The Iron Fleet, seemingly invincible just weeks ago, suffers its first major defeat since the rebellion began. "We cannot fight dragons at sea," Theon tells his father privately after receiving the casualty reports. "Every ship we send against them is suicide." "Then we adapt," Balon replies stubbornly. "We build ballistae, we train archers, we find ways to bring down flying creatures. And while we're adapting, they're conquering. Every day we spend learning to fight dragons is another day they consolidate control over the mainland kingdoms." The strategic situation deteriorates rapidly as summer progresses into autumn. Dragon attacks systematically destroy Iron Island patrol vessels, while leaving the core fleet afraid to venture far from home waters. Trade with allied kingdoms becomes impossible when merchant ships refuse to risk dragon fire. Most critically, the Northern Alliance shows signs of strain as Robb Stark begins to question whether the Iron Islands can maintain their commitments while dealing with the Targaryen threat. It is during this period of crisis that Theon makes a decision that will define the rest of his life. If his father will not seek alliance with Daenerys Targaryen, then perhaps he must do so himself. The plan takes weeks to arrange, requiring discreet communications through intermediaries and careful coordination with northern allies who share his strategic assessment. Robb Stark, despite his youth, understands that the Dragon Queen represents a threat to northern independence as well as Iron Island sovereignty. If she conquers the Seven Kingdoms, she will inevitably move against the breakaway kingdoms that declared independence during the succession crisis. A 3-way alliance, Theon proposes, during a secret meeting at Moat Cailin. North, Iron Islands, and Targaryens. Mutual recognition of independence in exchange for coordinated military support. "Your father will never agree to it," Robb points out. "But my father doesn't have to know about it until the terms are already negotiated. It is a betrayal of filial duty that goes against everything Iron Island culture values. Sons obey fathers, subjects serve kings, and loyalty flows upward through chains of command that have existed for centuries. But Theon has learned that sometimes survival requires choices that tradition cannot accommodate." The negotiations with Daenerys Targaryen take place through intermediaries, with messages passing between Dragon Queen and Iron Island heir through a network of contacts that includes exiled maesters, sell-sail captains, and northern lords sympathetic to pragmatic solutions. The process is slow, dangerous, and fraught with possibilities for betrayal or misunderstanding. But gradually, a framework emerges. As Daenerys recognizes the practical benefits of alliance, with established naval power and northern military strength, the Iron Islands and the North offer something she needs: local knowledge, experienced commanders, and a shared and populations that have already demonstrated their willingness to resist royal authority. The proposed alliance would create 3 independent kingdoms sharing defensive obligations and trade agreements. Each would maintain internal sovereignty while coordinating external policy. Most importantly, the dragons would be used to protect all 3 kingdoms rather than conquer them. It is an elegant solution that addresses everyone's strategic needs while respecting political realities. But it also requires Theon to act without his father's knowledge or consent, placing personal judgment above cultural loyalty in ways that could be seen as the ultimate betrayal of Iron Island values. Standing on the walls of Pike, as autumn storms batter the ancient stones, Theon reflects on how far he has traveled from the boy who chose to stay with his father rather than go to Winterfell as a hostage. That choice led to education in leadership, strategy, and the arts of war. But it also led to this moment, where wisdom and loyalty point in opposite directions. The dragons circle in the distance like storm clouds given wings and fire. They represent change that cannot be stopped, only adapted to or destroyed by. The Iron Islands can evolve with the changing world, or they can maintain their traditions while the world moves on without them. For Theon Greyjoy, the choice is clear even if the consequences remain uncertain. The shadow of dragons has fallen across the 7 kingdoms, and only those wise enough to seek shelter rather than challenge the storm will survive what comes next. The revolution he helped create is about to face its greatest test. Whether it survives depends on choices that will challenge every assumption about loyalty, independence, and the price of survival in a world where dragons have returned to darken the sky. The plan is madness, but madness wrapped in careful calculation and desperate necessity. In the depths of winter, as dragonfire continues to ravage Iron Island shipping, Theon Greyjoy stands before the largest construction project in his people's history. Stretched across the narrow channel between Great Wyke and Orkmont, a massive net of Valyrian steel chains and kraken-hide rope spans nearly half a mile of open water. "It has to work," Theon tells his father as they survey the trap from the deck of the Iron Victory. "Dragons are fast and deadly, but they're still animals. Animals can be caught." Balon Greyjoy, now 61, and bearing the weight of months of military setbacks, studies his son's creation with a mixture of pride and skepticism. The net represents everything Theon has learned about strategy, engineering, and the adaptation of traditional methods to unprecedented challenges. But it also represents their last hope of fighting dragons on anything approaching equal terms. "The bait?" Balon asks. 12 war galleys, loaded with captured Lannister gold and sailing in formation that suggests a major supply convoy, Theon explains. "Intelligence suggests Daenerys uses her dragons primarily to support ground operations, but she won't ignore such a tempting target." The trap is elegant in its simplicity. Dragons hunting ships must fly low to breathe fire effectively. The net, suspended between hidden towers on opposite shores, is positioned at exactly the altitude where a dragon would need to fly for optimal attack positioning. Weighted with iron and reinforced with chains, it should be strong enough to entangle even the largest dragon, long enough for ballista crews to finish the job. What makes the plan truly desperate is that it requires someone to spring the trap manually. The net release mechanism must be triggered at precisely the right moment, when the dragon is committed to its attack, but not yet close enough to incinerate the operator. That someone, despite every argument his family and advisors have offered, will be King Balon Greyjoy himself. "I should be the one," Theon argues for the 100th time. "You're the king. The islands need you." "The islands need a king who leads from the front," Balon replies with finality. "Besides, you're the one with plans for dealing with 3 kingdoms and dragon queens. I'm just an old man who knows how to die well." The attack comes on a grey winter morning, when visibility is limited and sea mist clings to the water like a burial shroud. The bait convoy sails into the channel exactly as planned, 12 war galleys heavy with captured treasure and sailing in formation that screams valuable target to anyone watching from above. Viserion, the cream and gold dragon, rises from his perch on Dragonstone like death-taking wing. Not even at a distance of several miles, his roar echoes across the water with enough force to make the trap's support towers vibrate. This is not the largest of Daenerys's dragons, but it is still a creature out of legend, a living embodiment of fire and fury that has not been seen in the world for over a century. The dragon's approach is everything Theon predicted and feared. Viserion flies high initially, circling the convoy to assess the threat and select his angle of attack. Then, as the ships enter the channel's narrowest point, he drops toward the water with predatory intent, wings folded for maximum speed, mouth already glowing with the fire that will turn ships to infernos. "Now, father!" Theon shouts from his position on the Iron Victory. Theon Greyjoy stands at the release mechanism, his weathered hands gripping the great lever that will drop the net. Around him, the hidden ballista crews adjust their aim, while chain haulers prepare to secure anything the net might catch. This is the moment toward which months of planning and construction have led. The net falls with perfect timing, its vast expanse of steel and hide dropping across Viserion's flight path just as the dragon commits to his attack run. For one heart-stopping moment, it appears the plan will work. The net wraps around the dragon's wings and neck, its weight dragging the great creature toward the water, while ballista bolts streak through the air. Then everything goes wrong. Viserion's dragonfire is not just breath weapon, but expression of rage and pain. As the net tightens around him, the dragon unleashes a torrent of flame that ignites the kraken hide sections and softens the steel chains until they snap under his thrashing weight. Worse, his roar of fury brings an immediate response from across the narrow sea. Drogon, the largest and most aggressive of the three dragons, appears on the horizon, like a black storm cloud racing toward battle. Behind him comes Rhaegal, green as sea foam and twice as deadly. The trap designed to catch one dragon now faces three, and the carefully prepared positions suddenly become targets for coordinated attack. "Get the king out of there," Theon screams to his crew, but it is already too late. Theon Greyjoy dies as he lived, facing his enemies with steel in his hand and defiance in his heart. The hidden tower where he operated the trap mechanism becomes the focus of dragonfire, as all three creatures converge on the threat that dared to challenge them. Stone melts, iron flows like water, and the man who declared himself king of the Iron Islands dies in flames that burn hot enough to turn bone to ash. The disaster is complete within minutes. The trap is destroyed, the bait convoy scattered or sunk, and the hidden ballista positions revealed and burned. More critically, the king of the Iron Islands is dead, killed in a gambit that not only failed, but demonstrated the futility of fighting dragons with conventional weapons. The Iron Victory limps back to Pike, carrying news that will reshape the island's political landscape forever. Theon Greyjoy, the man who led 2 rebellions and crowned himself king, has died attempting to kill a dragon with nets and chains. His son Theon, architect of the failed plan, returns home as the apparent heir to a crown that may not be his to claim. The Great Hall of Pike fills with mourners and political opportunists in equal measure. Lords who supported Balon's reign now eye each other with calculation, wondering who will emerge as the next leader and what policies that leadership might pursue. The unity that carried the Iron Islands through years of successful rebellion begins to fracture the moment news of the king's death spreads throughout the islands. It is into this atmosphere of uncertainty and ambition that Theon Greyjoy returns. The Crow's Eye has been absent from the Iron Islands for over a decade, or sailing the far seas in his ship, silence while his brothers fought and died for their homeland's independence. But news of dragons awakened and kings fallen has drawn him home like a shark drawn to blood in the water. Euron's return is announced by the sound of his ship's horns echoing across Lordsport Harbour, a sound that sends chills through every Iron Islander old enough to remember his reputation. The Crow's eye is brilliance and madness combined. A man who has seen more of the world than any other Iron Islander alive, and learned dark secrets in distant lands. He comes ashore, wearing a crown of driftwood and carrying prizes that make every observer stop and stare. Valyrian steel armor that gleams like dark water. A horn carved from what appears to be dragon bone, inscribed with glyphs that hurt the eyes to look upon directly. Most significantly, tales of knowledge gained in the ruins of old Valyria about the nature of dragons and those who would master them. "Nephew," Euron says to Theon when they meet in Pike's great hall, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who has never doubted his own importance. "I hear you've been playing at kings and dragons while I sailed the wide world, learning how such games are really won." The horn he carries becomes the center of every conversation, every fearful whisper, every ambitious calculation. Those who have studied the ancient lore recognize it immediately. Dragonbinder, one of the legendary artifacts of old Valyria, crafted to give mortals power over the great winged beasts that once ruled the world. "Dragons are not enemies to be fought," Euron explains to the assembled lords during an impromptu gathering. "What they are tools to be mastered. Your father died because he tried to kill something that should have been claimed. The implications hang in the air like smoke from dragon fire. If the Horn truly can control dragons, then the Iron Islands need not fear Daenerys Targaryen. Instead, they could turn her greatest weapons against her, claiming the power of the Dragon Queen for themselves. But first, the question of succession must be resolved. The call for a Kingsmoot goes out across the Iron Islands within days of Euron's return. It is the ancient way, older than the conquest, older than the kingdoms of the mainland. When the king of the Iron Islands dies, those with claims to the throne must make their case before the assembled captains and lords. The strongest voice, or backed by the most compelling arguments and the most powerful supporters, claims the Seastone chair. The Kingsmoot convenes on Old Wick, the most ancient of the Iron Islands, in the shadow of the Grey King's Hall, where the first kings of the Iron Islands held court 5,000 years ago. Lords arrive from every inhabited rock in the archipelago, their ships filling the harbours while their men make camp on the windswept shores. 3 candidates present themselves for the crown. Asha Greyjoy, Balon's daughter, and a proven war leader in her own right, argues for continuity with her father's policies and caution in dealing with dragons. Theon Greyjoy, Balon's brother and captain of the Iron Fleet, promises to continue the war against all enemies until victory or death. And then there is Theon. There's no longer the boy who stayed with his father, but a man who has led successful campaigns, forged unprecedented alliances, and transformed the Iron Islands from defeated rebels to respected power. His speech to the Kingsmoot becomes the stuff of legend. "Lords of the Iron Islands," he begins, standing before the assembled captains with the confidence earned through years of victory and failure. "My father died, attempting to fight dragons with the old ways. Nets and chains, ballista and arrows, tools meant for ships and men, not for creatures out of legend." The crowd murmurs, some in agreement, others in skeptical calculation. "But my uncle offers us something different. Not futile resistance to dragons, but mastery over them. Not death in glorious defeat, but victory through adaptation and intelligence." He gestures toward Euron, who stands nearby with his dragon horn gleaming in the pale winter sunlight. "I propose alliance between the old ways and the new knowledge, Iron Island strength guided by Iron Island wisdom. We will not bow to the Dragon Queen, but neither will we die charging uselessly into dragonfire. We will master the dragons, claim their power, and use it to secure our independence forever." The speech that follows outlines a vision for the Iron Islands, unlike anything in their history. Military power backed by diplomatic intelligence, traditional strength enhanced by magical knowledge, independence secured not through isolation, but through the strategic use of alliances and adapted enemies' weapons against them. Most importantly, Theon promises to work with Euron rather than against him, and recognizing his uncle's knowledge while maintaining the strategic partnerships that have brought the islands their current success. It is a platform that offers something for everyone. Traditionalists get their independence, innovators get their adaptations, and pragmatists get a realistic path to survival in a world where dragons have returned. The vote, when it comes, is not unanimous, but it is decisive. Theon Greyjoy, son of Balon, architect of the Northern Alliance, strategist of the Western campaigns, becomes the new king of the Iron Islands. But it is a crown claimed through political skill rather than raw strength, through coalition building rather than intimidation. Euron's acceptance of the result surprises many observers. Rather than challenging his nephew's victory or sailing away in wounded pride, of the Crow's Eye offers his allegiance and his knowledge in service of Iron Island independence. The dragon horn, he declares, belongs to the Iron Islands and their king, whoever that might be. "You have the crown, nephew," Euron says, during the private meeting that follows the public ceremony. "But do you have the stomach to use dragon fire against Dragon Queen?" It is a question that will define Theon's reign and determine the fate of his kingdom. The boy who chose loyalty over comfort has become a king who must choose between survival and principle, between the methods that brought success and the innovations that might ensure continued existence. Standing on the shores of Old Wick as the winter sun sets over the iron-grey waters, King Theon Greyjoy reflects on the path that brought him to this moment. Every choice, from staying with his father through alliance with the North to the desperate gambit that claimed Balon's life, has led to this crown and these responsibilities. The dragon horn in Euron's hands represents power beyond imagination, but also corruption beyond measure. Dragons are not ships to be sailed or swords to be wielded. They are living embodiments of destruction that have shaped the history of the known world. To master them might save the Iron Islands. To attempt and fail might doom them more surely than any conventional defeat. Fire and water, the ancient enemies, meet again in the person of a young king who must decide whether his people will adapt to a world of dragons or be consumed by their refusal to change. The king's moot is over, the crown is won, but the greatest test of Theon Greyjoy's revolution is just beginning. The Iron Islands have a new king, one shaped by victory and defeat, alliance and betrayal, tradition and innovation. Whether that king can navigate the dangers ahead will determine not just the fate of his realm, but the balance of power throughout the known world. Dragons circle overhead like storm clouds, pregnant with lightning. In their shadow, the Iron Islands prepare for the most dangerous gamble in their long history. The crown of salt and sea sits heavy on Theon's head as he stands before the seastone chair for his formal coronation. The ancient throne of the Iron Islands has been restored to its full glory, its black stone carved with the kraken and longships of his house, its arms worn smooth by generations of kings who ruled when the Iron Islands bowed to no mainland lord. But this coronation is different from his father's. Where Balon claimed the crown through defiance and tradition alone, Theon ascends through a careful blend of innovation and ancient custom. The ceremony itself honors the old ways. Priests of the drowned god performing the blessing, lords of every major island swearing their oaths, the crown placed by hands still wet with seawater from the sacred pool. Yet the oaths sworn today include promises never heard in the Great Hall of Pike, vows to protect not just Iron Island independence, but the rights of all subjects regardless of birth, pledges to honor alliance obligations with foreign kingdoms. Most controversially, commitments to restrict the taking of salt wives and the practice of thrall-taking from conquered territories. I swear by salt and sea, by iron and blood, to defend the Iron Islands and all who call them home, Theon declares as the crown settles on his brow, to honor the old ways while embracing the wisdom needed for new times, to lead not just through strength, but through justice. The words echo strangely in the ancient hall, concepts like justice and rights mixing uneasily with traditional Iron Island values. Some lords shift uncomfortably, while others nod approval. The division that will define Theon's reign is already visible in the faces of his sworn vassals. The first test of his new approach comes sooner than expected. 3 days after his coronation, a raven arrives from the wall bearing unexpected news. Jon Snow, bastard son of Ned Stark and newly elected Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, requests urgent communication with all the kings of Westeros regarding threats beyond the wall. "White Walkers?" Theon asks his maester as he reads the message. "I thought those were just stories to frighten children." Lord Commander Snow claims to have fought them personally, Your Grace. He requests immediate audience with any ruler willing to listen to his warnings. It is Euron who provides context that chills the blood. During his travels in the Far East, the Crow's Eye encountered ancient texts that speak of the Long Night, the last time the White Walkers marched south. According to those sources, the dead army was turned back only through the combined efforts of every kingdom in Westeros, united in desperate alliance against extinction itself. "But if the boy at the wall speaks truth," Euron tells his nephew during a private council session, "then dragons and kings' quarrels become irrelevant. The dead don't care about independence or crowns. They want to end all life." The warning arrives at a moment when Theon desperately needs to consolidate his kingdom's position. The war with Daenerys has reached a stalemate, with neither side able to achieve decisive victory. Her dragons control the skies, but Iron Island ships still dominate large sections of the western seas. More critically, the economic costs of continued warfare threaten to bankrupt both kingdoms. It is this mutual exhaustion that creates an opportunity for negotiation. Jon Snow, speaking with the moral authority of the Night's Watch and the practical knowledge of someone who has actually fought the dead, proposes a temporary truce between all claimants to focus on the existential threat from beyond the wall. The negotiations take place on neutral ground, the ancient fortress of Harrenhal, its massive walls and melted towers serving as a reminder of what Dragonfire can accomplish. Theon arrives with a small delegation, including Euron and his new wife, Jane Westerling, whose marriage to the Iron King has cemented alliance between the islands and several formerly hostile Westerlands houses. The marriage itself had been a calculated political move, but one that surprised everyone by developing into genuine affection. Jane's influence on Theon's thinking had already been significant during their conversations in Lannisport, and formal alliance through marriage has accelerated his evolution toward more moderate governance. "Or, Your Grace," she had said during their wedding negotiations, "the Iron Island's strength has always been their independence. But independence doesn't require isolation. You can be Iron Islanders while also being part of the larger world." The wisdom of that perspective becomes clear during the Harrenhal negotiations. Daenerys Targaryen arrives with one of her dragons, but also with advisors who understand the strategic implications of Jon Snow's warnings. If the dead truly march south in numbers sufficient to threaten all life, then the living kingdoms must cooperate or face extinction separately. "King Theon," Daenerys says when they meet in Harrenhal's Great Hall, her voice carrying the formal courtesy of diplomatic necessity rather than personal warmth. "Lord Commander Snow speaks of threats that dwarf our current conflicts." "Queen Daenerys," Theon replies with equal formality, "perhaps the time has come to discover whether we can be allies against a common enemy, rather than competitors for a crown neither may live to wear." The negotiations that follow are unlike anything in Westerosi history. 3 rulers, the Dragon Queen with her ancient bloodline and mystical power, the Iron King with his naval strength and strategic alliances, and the bastard Lord Commander with only moral authority and desperate warning, working together to address a threat that none fully understands. Jon Snow's presentation of evidence is methodical and terrifying. Survivors' accounts of whites that feel no pain and obey no commands except those of their masters. With ancient weapons that kill the living and raise them as soldiers for the dead army. Most chilling, reports that the White Walker numbers grow with every southern victory, each fallen warrior becoming a weapon against his former allies. How many dead? Theon asks during one session. Thousands already, Jon replies grimly. But if they break through the wall and reach the major population centers, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. The mathematics are simple and horrifying. Every person killed becomes a soldier in the enemy army. Every battle won by the living that costs lives ultimately strengthens the dead. Traditional warfare becomes not just useless, but counterproductive against an enemy that grows stronger through conventional victory. The truce agreement that emerges from these negotiations is revolutionary in its scope, or all hostilities between Daenerys and Theon's kingdoms cease immediately. Dragons will be used to evacuate civilians from vulnerable northern territories rather than attacking enemy positions. Iron Island ships will transport refugees and supplies rather than raiding coastal targets. Most significantly, Euron's dragon horn enters the calculations in ways none of the negotiators initially anticipated. If the dead army includes risen dragons, and Jon Snow's intelligence suggests that possibility, then the ability to control or counter dragon power becomes crucial to survival itself. The horn binds dragons to its user's will, Euron explains to the assembled negotiators. But it exacts a price. The magic consumes the user, burning them from within. It's not a weapon to be used lightly. Theon studies his uncle carefully. But it can be used? If the alternative is extinction, yes. But whoever sounds it will not survive to see the victory it might win. The implications hang heavy in the war-torn hall. The Iron Islands possess a weapon that might counter the ultimate threat, but using it requires the ultimate sacrifice from whoever wields it. The return journey to Pike takes Theon through the northern territories that his forces conquered during the early phases of the rebellion. What he sees there validates every choice he has made since becoming king. The reformed Iron Island governance, blending traditional strength with practical justice, has created something unprecedented, a population that genuinely supports their Iron Island rulers rather than simply submitting to them. And villages that might have been burned and looted under the old way now thrive under Iron Island protection. Former enemies have become productive subjects, contributing taxes and levies while receiving guaranteed rights and protections. Most remarkably, several northern lords have requested permanent incorporation into the Iron Kingdom rather than return to Stark rule. "You've built something new," Jane observes as they tour the mainland territories. "Not just Iron Island rule, but Iron Island justice. Your people are learning they can be strong without being cruel." But not all Iron Islanders appreciate this evolution. The traditionalist faction, led by captains who remember the pure simplicity of the old ways, grows increasingly vocal in their opposition to Theon's reforms. The restrictions on salt wives, the protections for thralls, and the emphasis on governance rather than raiding, all of it strikes at cultural assumptions that have defined Iron Island identity for centuries. The opposition crystallizes around Dunstan Drum, Lord of Old Wick, and keeper of the ancestral weapon Red Rain. A traditionalist who supported Euron during the King's Moot, Drum now challenges Theon's innovations directly. "We are Iron Islanders," Drum declares during a contentious council session. "We take what we need by strength and let the weak serve the strong. These green land laws you impose make us soft, make us weak. These laws make us sustainable," Theon counters. "A kingdom built on nothing but taking cannot last. Eventually you run out of things worth taking, and your own people turn against you." The debate reveals fundamental philosophical divisions about what the Iron Islands should become. Traditionalists want to preserve the culture that made them unique, even if that culture ultimately limits their growth and stability. Reformers argue for adaptation that ensures survival, even if it means changing essential characteristics that have defined them for millennia. The crisis comes to a head when Drum openly calls for Theon's abdication, claiming that a king who restricts the iron price has abandoned his people's essential nature. Several other traditionalist lords support the challenge, creating the most serious internal threat to Theon's rule since his coronation. The resolution comes through a mechanism that honors tradition while enabling innovation. Rather than civil war or political maneuvering, Theon proposes single combat between champions, himself representing the new way, Drum representing the old. The winner's vision will guide Iron Island policy, but both sides will accept the outcome and maintain unity against external threats. The combat takes place on the shores of Pike, witnessed by lords from every island and many common folk who have travelled to see their king defend his crown with steel. Dunstan Drum is a formidable opponent, wielding red rain with the skill of decades of experience and the conviction of absolute certainty about his cause. But Theon fights with more than skill. He fights with the wisdom gained through years of successful leadership, the knowledge of what works and what doesn't, the understanding that strength without purpose becomes self-defeating brutality. The duel is brief but decisive. Theon's victory comes not through superior swordsmanship, but through superior strategy, using Drum's aggression against him and finding the opening that skill alone could not create. When red rain falls from nerveless fingers and Dunstan Drum yields, the traditionalist opposition collapses. "The king has spoken with steel," Theon declares to the assembled crowd. But let Lord Drum's courage be remembered too. Opposition born of conviction deserves respect, even when it must be overcome. The magnanimity of victory, the integration of defeated opponents rather than their destruction, exemplifies the new Iron Island way that Theon has been developing. Strength remains paramount, but strength guided by wisdom and tempered by justice creates more lasting success than strength alone. As autumn deepens toward winter and reports from the wall grow increasingly dire, King Theon Greyjoy stands at the pinnacle of his achievements. The Iron Islands are united under his rule, allied with former enemies, respected throughout Westeros as a legitimate kingdom rather than mere rebels or raiders. His marriage to Jane Westerling has produced not just political alliance, but genuine partnership, her mainland perspective complementing his Iron Island strength to create governance more effective than either could achieve alone. The reforms he has implemented have created the most prosperous period in Iron Island history, while maintaining the essential independence that defines his people's identity. But prosperity and success mean nothing if the dead march south and turn every achievement to ash. The messages from Jon Snow grow more urgent with each passing week. The wall is under increasing pressure. Ancient evils stir in the far north. The long peace that enabled the Iron Islands' rise may be ending, replaced by a war for the very survival of the living world. Standing on the walls of Pike, as winter winds carry the scent of snow from the northern mountains, King Theon Greyjoy reflects on the choices that brought him to this moment. The boy who chose loyalty over comfort has become a man who must choose between different forms of loyalty, to his people's traditions or their survival, to his kingdom's independence or the world's preservation. The dragon horn that might counter the ultimate threat sits in his treasury, waiting for the hand that will claim its power and pay its price. Whether that hand will be his own, or Euron's, or someone else's entirely, remains to be seen. But as reports of the dead army's southern march reach even the distant Iron Islands, Theon knows that the time for such choices is approaching rapidly. The Iron King's gambit, the attempt to forge a new path between tradition and innovation, independence and cooperation, strength and wisdom, has succeeded beyond all expectations. But success in peace is no guarantee of success in war, and the war approaching from beyond the wall will test every assumption about what it means to be strong, what it means to survive, and what it means to deserve survival. The Iron Islands have been reborn under Theon's rule. Whether that rebirth will endure the coming darkness depends on choices yet to be made and prices yet to be paid. The Raven arrives at Pike on the darkest day of winter, its black wings struggling against winds that carry more than cold. The message it bears is written in Jon Snow's hand, but the words seem to come from nightmare itself. The wall has fallen. The dead march south. All who would live must flee or fight. There is no other choice. King Theon Greyjoy reads the message 3 times before the full implications settle in his mind, like ice forming on still water. Everything they planned for, everything they feared, every warning Jon Snow delivered during the negotiations at Harrenhal, all of it has come to pass. The ancient barrier that held back the darkness for 8,000 years has crumbled, and death itself walks freely in the world of the living. "How many ships can we ready within the day?" Theon asks his assembled council, his voice carrying the calm authority that has defined his reign. "Every vessel that can float," Victarion replies without hesitation. 200 war galleys, 50 transport ships, countless fishing boats and merchant vessels. "Why, Your Grace?" "Because we're about to become the largest evacuation fleet in the history of Westeros." The decision represents everything Theon has learned about leadership, and everything the Iron Islands have become under his rule. The old way would have been to sail south, away from the threat, preserving Iron Island strength while letting the mainland kingdoms face the dead alone. But the new way, the way that has brought prosperity and respect to his people, demands something different. Within hours, the greatest naval mobilization in Iron Island history begins. Ships that have spent months raiding and fighting now load themselves with supplies for a very different kind of mission: food, medicine, warm clothing, weapons, and most critically, dragon glass, the volcanic stone that can kill White Walkers and their whites. The Iron Islands' volcanic origins, once seen as a disadvantage compared to the rich farmlands of the mainland, become their greatest asset. Every island has deposits of dragon glass, and Iron Island smiths have been quietly stockpiling the material ever since Jon Snow's warnings began arriving. Now that stockpile becomes literally more valuable than gold. "Load every ship with as much dragon glass as it can carry," Theon orders the harbour master at Lordsport. "Weapons, arrowheads, spear points, anything that can kill the dead." But the most important cargo is human. Reports flood in from the northern coasts. White Harbour under siege, Winterfell abandoned, the Stark forces in full retreat south, while civilians flee ahead of the advancing dead. Traditional evacuation routes are overwhelmed or blocked entirely, leaving tens of thousands of refugees trapped in coastal areas with no means of escape. The Iron Fleet's arrival changes everything. Theon himself leads the first evacuation convoy, his flagship Iron Victory leading 50 war galleys into the harbour of White Harbour as the dead army approaches from the north. What he finds there validates every choice he has made since becoming king. The harbour is chaos incarnate. Thousands of refugees crowd the docks, while a much smaller number of available ships struggle to accommodate them all. Panic spreads faster than organization, and people fight each other for space on vessels that cannot possibly carry everyone to safety. "Signal the fleet," Theon commands. "All ships to begin immediate embarkation. Civilians first, soldiers and supplies second. No one fights over space. There's room for everyone if we're disciplined about it." The Iron Island approach to the evacuation is methodical, efficient, and unprecedented in its scope. Years of successful military campaigns have taught Theon's captains how to coordinate complex operations under pressure, and that knowledge now serves a humanitarian purpose. Ship after ship loads to capacity with refugees from throughout the north. Fishing boats that once hunted cod now carry children and elderly. War galleys designed for battle become transport vessels, ferrying entire families to safety. Most remarkably, every rescue operation includes supplies of dragon-glass weapons, turning evacuees into potential soldiers in the war against the dead. Your Grace, Captain Ralph Kenning reports as the evacuation proceeds. We've received word from the Dreadfort. Lord Bolton requests immediate evacuation for his household and garrison. Theon considers this for a moment. Rose Bolton has been a reluctant ally at best, more enemy than friend throughout the northern campaigns. Under the old way, this would be an opportunity to let a rival face destruction while preserving Iron Island resources for more worthy causes. Send 3 ships immediately, Theon orders. Whatever our past differences, we don't abandon people to the dead. It is exactly this kind of decision that has transformed the Iron Islands from feared raiders to respected rulers. Mercy extended even to former enemies, strength used to protect rather than conquer, leadership that considers the greater good even when it costs immediate advantage. The evacuation continues for days as reports arrive of the dead army's relentless southern advance. Entire northern houses, Stark, Umber, Karstark, Mormont, evacuate their ancestral seats and retreat to defensive positions further south. But unlike previous conflicts where retreat meant abandonment, the Iron Fleet ensures that people and supplies reach safety in organized fashion. The personal reunion Theon has both longed for and dreaded comes during the evacuation of Winterfell itself. Robb Stark, now 20 and hardened by years of warfare, boards the Iron Victory as the last of his family's retainers are loaded onto transport ships. Theon, Robb says simply as they stand together on the deck that has carried the Iron King through so many campaigns. Robb, Theon replies, and for a moment they are not kings and lords, but young men who have grown up in a world that demanded they become leaders before they were ready. I never thanked you properly, Robb continues, for the alliance, for the support, for keeping your word when others would have looked for advantage in our weakness. We're not done yet, Theon responds. The dead don't care about kingdoms or crowns. If we're going to survive this, it won't be as Iron Islanders or Northmen, but as something larger. The conversation that follows, conducted in the shadow of burning Winterfell as the dead army approaches from the north, serves as both reconciliation and strategic planning session. The young lords who might have been foster brothers in another timeline finally address the choices that brought them to this moment. I used to wonder what would have happened if you'd come to Winterfell as a hostage, Robb admits. If we'd grown up together, trained together, faced these challenges as brothers rather than allies. We might have been closer, Theon acknowledges. But would we have been stronger? The Iron Islands needed their heir to stay and learn what it truly means to be Iron Islander. And the North needed its heir to learn leadership without the complications of competing loyalties. It is a mature assessment from both young leaders, recognizing that the path they took, difficult as it was, created the strengths they now need to face the ultimate test. The strategic situation that emerges from their planning is both desperate and hopeful. The combined forces of North, Iron Islands, and Targaryen dragons represent the largest military alliance in Westerosi history, but they face an enemy that grows stronger with every battle, that feels no fear or pain, that turns every casualty into a new soldier for their ranks. We can't win through traditional warfare, Theon explains to the Joint War Council convened aboard his flagship. Every person we lose becomes a weapon against us. We need to end this quickly. Decisively, before the dead army becomes too large to defeat. The plan that emerges from these discussions requires unprecedented coordination and terrible sacrifice. Daenerys will use her dragons to strike directly at the Night King, the White Walker leader, whose death should theoretically stop the entire army. But reaching him requires breaking through thousands of Whites and lesser White Walkers, a task that will cost lives they cannot afford to lose. The Iron Fleet's role becomes crucial to the strategy's success. While land forces engage the main army and dragons strike from above, Iron Island ships will control the waterways that the dead must cross to reach the southern kingdoms. Every river, every bay, every narrow channel becomes a potential choke point where the dead can be delayed or destroyed. Ships can move faster than walking corpses, Theon explains to his captains during the final planning session. We use that advantage to stay ahead of them, to strike where they're weakest, to prevent them from spreading too far south while the main battle is fought. But the strategy requires a sacrifice that chills everyone who hears it. To hold the crucial waterway at the neck, the narrow passage that connects north and south requires ships and men to stay in position even as the dead army approaches. Someone must hold that line long enough for the southern evacuation to complete, knowing they may not survive the experience. "I'll take the Iron Fleet to the neck," Theon announces to the assembled council. "Your Grace," Victarion objects immediately. "You're needed to coordinate the overall strategy. They send me with the fleet, while you—" "I'm needed where the fighting is hardest and the price is highest," Theon interrupts. "The Iron Islands have spent centuries taking from others. Now we give something back." The final battle begins at dawn on the shortest day of winter, when darkness lasts nearly 20 hours and the sun barely rises above the southern horizon. The dead army, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, advances across the frozen landscape like a grey tide of destruction. From his position on the Iron Victory, anchored in the narrow channel at Moat Kellin, Theon can see the approaching horde stretching to the horizon. Whites in their thousands, White Walker commanders riding dead horses, and behind them all the Night King himself, a figure of ice and shadow mounted on an undead dragon. All ships. "Maintain formation," Theon commands through signal flags and horn calls. "Let them come to us. Every minute we hold this position is another 100 lives saved in the south." The Iron Fleet has been configured for this specific battle. Catapults loaded with dragonglass projectiles line the decks of every war galley. Archers with obsidian-tipped arrows stand ready along the rails. Most critically, every ship carries barrels of wildfire, the alchemical substance that burns even on water. The attack comes not from land, but from above. The undead dragon, massive and terrible, swoops toward the Iron Fleet, breathing ice-cold fire that freezes rather than burns. Ships touched by that breath become sculptures of ice, their crews frozen solid in moments. But Theon has prepared for this too. As the undead dragon makes its attack run, Theon Greyjoy emerges from the Iron Victory's cabin, carrying Dragonbinder. The ancient horn gleams with its own inner light, the Valyrian glyphs along its length pulsing with power that hurts the eyes to witness. "Remember me as Iron Islander," Euron says to his nephew, then raises the horn to his lips. The sound that emerges is not music, but pure command, a note that resonates in dimensions beyond the physical. The undead dragon staggers in mid-flight, its connection to the Night King wavering as older magic asserts dominance. For crucial moments, the greatest weapon in the dead army's arsenal becomes confused, directionless, fighting against commands it cannot resist. Euron collapses the moment the horn's note fades, his body consumed by the magical fire that gives the artifact its power. But his sacrifice creates the opening Daenerys needs. Her living dragon, Drogon, strikes the confused, undead beast from above while it struggles against the horn's influence. The battle between dragons rages above the Iron Fleet, while below, the dead army reaches the water's edge and begins its crossing. Whites cannot swim, but they can walk along the bottom of shallow channels, emerging from the water like nightmares to attack the anchored ships. "All crews, prepare for boarding action," Theon commands as the first Whites clamber up the sides of his ships. "Remember, these things don't feel pain, but dragonglass kills them permanently. Every blow must count." The fighting that follows is unlike anything in Iron Island history. These are not battles for glory or treasure, but for the right to continue existing. Theon himself stands at the bow of the Iron Victory, a dragon-glass sword in each hand, cutting down wights as they attempt to board his flagship. But even as the Iron Fleet holds the waterway and prevents the dead from spreading south, the true battle rages in the sky above. Dragons clash in aerial combat, while below, the Night King advances through his army with inexorable purpose, seeking to reach the ships and their human crews. The end comes suddenly. Daenerys, mounted on Drogon, breaks through the undead dragon's defenses and strikes the Night King directly with dragonfire. The White Walker leader's destruction sends a shockwave through the entire dead army. Whites collapse mid-attack, White Walkers shatter like ice sculptures, and the undead dragon crashes into the frozen marsh with a sound like a mountain falling. In the sudden silence that follows, Theon stands among the wreckage of battle, surrounded by his surviving crews and the debris of the greatest naval action ever fought in Westeros. The Iron Fleet has held the line, prevented the dead from spreading south, and played its part in saving the world of the living. "Signal all ships," Theon commands, his voice hoarse from shouting orders through the long battle. "Begin recovery operations, search for survivors, secure the wounded, prepare for return to port." As winter begins to fade and spring touches the world for the first time in years, King Theon Greyjoy reflects on the cost of victory. Hundreds of his people died holding the waterway, including his uncle Euron, whose sacrifice made victory possible. The Iron Fleet is reduced to less than half its former strength, but they have achieved something unprecedented in Iron Island history. They have saved more lives than they took, protected more than they conquered, given more than they received. The boy who chose loyalty over comfort has become a king who chose duty over survival, leading his people not to glorious defeat, but to meaningful victory. The dead are gone, as winter is ending, and the world of the living continues because of choices made by those who understood that some things matter more than individual survival. The Iron Islands, transformed under Theon's leadership, have proven that strength and mercy can coexist, that tradition and innovation can work together, that even the children of the sea can learn to swim in deeper waters than they ever imagined possible. Standing on the deck of his battered flagship, as the Iron Fleet sails home through waters freed from winter's grip, King Theon Greyjoy knows that the hardest battles are over. The dead are defeated, the realm is safe, and the Iron Islands have earned their place as protectors rather than predators. The revolution he helped build has survived its ultimate test, but now comes the harder task of building a peace worthy of the sacrifice that made it possible. 7 years have passed since the dead walked, and winter touched the world with ice and shadow. The Iron Islands rise from the morning mist like jewels set in grey waters, their ancient stones warmed by spring sunlight, and the prosperity that comes from respect earned rather than fear imposed. King Theon Greyjoy, now 28 and bearing the scars of countless battles, stands on the rebuilt walls of Pike as ravens arrive from kingdoms throughout the known world. These are not messages of threat or demand, but of gratitude and alliance, trade agreements and diplomatic courtesies between equals who have proven their worth in humanity's darkest hour. Your Grace, Maester Wendermere approaches with the latest correspondence. Queen Daenerys writes from King's Landing. She formally requests Iron Island naval support for her expedition to the Summer Isles. King Robb sends word from Winterfell that the northern grain harvest exceeds all expectations, and he wishes to discuss expanding our trade agreements. Theon accepts the messages with the easy confidence of a ruler who has transformed not just his kingdom, but the entire political landscape of Westeros. The Iron Islands are no longer the feared raiders of his father's generation, or the desperate rebels of his own youth. They have become the maritime backbone of a more peaceful and prosperous realm. Prepare responses to both, Theon instructs. Inform Queen Daenerys that the Iron Fleet stands ready to support legitimate trade expansion. To tell King Robb that we welcome increased cooperation. The North's grain will feed our growing population, and our ships will carry northern goods to markets they could never reach alone. The transformation of the Iron Islands extends far beyond diplomacy and trade. Walking through Lordsport, the largest settlement in the archipelago, Theon sees changes that would astound his younger self. Schools where Iron Island children learn not just seamanship and warfare, but reading, mathematics, and the histories of distant lands. Workshops where former thralls work as free craftsmen, their skills valued and their families protected by law. Markets where goods from every corner of the known world change hands in peaceful commerce. Most remarkably, the harbour is filled with ships bearing the colours of a dozen different kingdoms. The northern timber ships unload their cargo beside Reach wine galleys, while Dornish spice traders conduct business with Iron Island captains who once would have sunk their vessels on sight. The old way of taking by force has given way to a new way of earning through service. "Father," a young voice calls out as Theon inspects the harbour facilities. His son Balon, named for his grandfather but raised in very different traditions, runs up with the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who sees the world as an adventure waiting to unfold. "What is it, little Kraken?" Theon asks, lifting the boy to his shoulders so he can see over the crowd of merchants and sailors. "Maester Qyburn is teaching us about the dragons in the old stories. Were they really as big as castles? Did they really breathe fire hot enough to melt stone?" "Some of them were," Theon confirms, remembering his own encounters with Daenerys' dragons during the dark days of the war. But the important thing to remember is that dragons, like all creatures, must be understood rather than simply feared or fought. It is a lesson that encapsulates everything Theon has learned about leadership, about power, about the difference between ruling and governing. The boy who once stood defiant in Pike's ruined halls has become a man who understands that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction serves justice, and when it serves only pride. The evening finds Theon in his solar, the same room where his father once planned rebellions and counted the cost of independence in blood and gold. But the maps spread across his desk tell a different story: shipping routes and trade agreements, defensive alliances, and cultural exchanges. The Iron Islands' power now extends across the narrow sea, not through conquest, but through cooperation. Queen Jane enters with their infant daughter Asha, named for Theon's sister, who died holding the line at Bear Island during the White Walker War. The Queen has grown into her role as ruler's partner, her mainland perspectives complementing Theon's Iron Island instincts to create governance more effective than either could achieve alone. "The Braavosi delegation is prepared for tomorrow's negotiations," she reports, settling into the chair across from his desk. "They're interested in establishing a permanent Iron Island presence in the free cities, or using our ships to protect their trade routes in exchange for preferential terms and banking privileges. And our captains? How do they feel about spending years away from home waters protecting foreign merchants?" Jane's smile carries the understanding, born of 7 years of marriage and shared rule. They see it as the ultimate validation of Iron Island seamanship, the greatest maritime power in the world asking for our protection. It's the kind of respect they've always wanted, earned through skill rather than fear. The conversation that follows touches on the deeper challenges of their transformed kingdom. How do you maintain Iron Island identity while integrating with the wider world? How do you honor traditions that shaped your people while abandoning practices that limited their growth? How do you balance the independence that defines your culture with the cooperation that ensures your survival? These are questions that have no easy answers, but Theon has learned that the best solutions often come from embracing complexity rather than seeking simplicity. The Iron Islands remain fiercely independent. They bow to no king, pay tribute to no throne, and make their own laws according to their own values. But independence no longer means isolation, and strength no longer requires the weakness of others. "Tomorrow I want to visit the new shipyards on Great Wick," Theon tells his queen as she prepares to retire for the evening. "The Myrish engineers say they're ready to begin construction of the first steam-powered vessels. If their designs work, Iron Island ships will be able to travel faster and farther than any others in the world. It is exactly the kind of innovation that defines Theon's reign, respecting tradition while embracing progress, maintaining Iron Island superiority through adaptation rather than aggression. The old way sought dominance through the inability of others to match Iron Island seamanship. The new way seeks leadership through the willingness to stay ahead of technological and social change. The following morning brings a ceremony that would have been unthinkable during his father's reign. Representatives from every major kingdom in Westeros, along with delegates from the free cities, and even the Summer Isles, gather in Pike's Great Hall to witness the signing of the Sunset Sea Accords. The agreement, negotiated over months of careful diplomacy, re-establishes the Iron Islands as the official protector of maritime trade routes throughout the Western waters. It is recognition of what everyone already knows, that Iron Island ships are the most skilled, Iron Island captains the most experienced, and Iron Island naval power the most effective in the known world. But it is also something more: acknowledgement that the Iron Islands have earned the right to such responsibility through their actions, rather than simply claiming it through force. The boy who stayed with his father, instead of going to Winterfell as a hostage, has become a king, whose word carries weight in every court and council, from Old Town to Braavos. "Lords and ladies of the realm," Theon addresses the assembled dignitaries as he signs the accords. "The Iron Islands accept this responsibility not as conquerors claiming tribute, but as partners in a larger enterprise. The seas connect us all, and their safety serves everyone who depends on maritime commerce." The ceremony concludes with the presentation of gifts from the visiting kingdoms: Valyrian steel from Qohor, rare woods from the Summer Isles, spices from the Far East that will make Iron Island merchants wealthy beyond their ancestors' dreams. But the most meaningful gift comes from an unexpected source. Samwell Tarly, now Grand Maester of the Citadel, presents a book he has compiled over years of research. "The true history of the Iron Islands," he announces to the assembled crowd, "is written to honor a people who proved that tradition and progress can strengthen each other, rather than stand in opposition." The book chronicles the complete transformation of Iron Island society, from the desperate raiders of Balon's first rebellion, through the strategic innovators of the White Walker War, to the respected maritime power they have become. More importantly, it shows how that transformation was achieved without abandoning the core values that make Iron Islanders unique. "We do not sow," Theon reads from the book's conclusion, "but we do reap what we earn. We take the iron price, but we pay it in service rather than suffering. We are hard as iron, fluid as water, and enduring as the sea itself." That evening, as the foreign dignitaries prepare for their departures and the castle settles into its usual routines, Theon takes his son to the highest tower of Pike. From there, they can see the entire archipelago spread out below them, ships moving between the islands, lights glowing in settlements that grow larger and more prosperous each year, the Iron Fleet at anchor in harbors that welcome rather than threaten the world beyond. "Tell me about grandfather," young Balon asks, as they watch the sunset paint the waters gold and crimson. "Your grandfather was a great man who faced impossible choices," Theon begins, settling his son on his lap as generations of Iron Island fathers have done. "He fought for our independence when everyone said we were too weak to stand alone. He refused to bow to foreign kings who demanded our submission, or he died trying to kill a dragon with nets and chains because he believed some things were worth any sacrifice. Was he right?" the boy asks with the directness that only children possess. "He was right about what mattered most," Theon replies carefully. "Independence, self-respect, the right to choose our own path." But he was wrong about how to achieve those things. He thought strength meant never asking for help, never admitting that others might have wisdom to offer, never changing even when change was necessary for survival. What did you do different? It is the question that cuts to the heart of everything, the choice that defined not just Theon's life, but the fate of his entire people. I learned that real strength comes from choosing when to stand alone and when to stand together. Your grandfather fought the world because he thought that was the only way to remain free. I worked with the world because I discovered that was the only way to remain strong. The conversation continues as the stars emerge, and the night settles over waters that have witnessed so much history, ancient kings and modern innovations, desperate battles and peaceful negotiations, the transformation of a people who thought they knew everything there was to know about survival. "Will I be king someday?" young Balon asks, as Theon carries him back toward the castle. "If the king's moot chooses you, and if you prove worthy of the choice," Theon replies. "But remember, being king isn't about commanding others to serve you. It's about serving others so well that they choose to follow you." Years later, when Theon is old and grey, and his son has grown into a man worthy of the Seastone chair, this conversation will be remembered as the moment when the new way of Iron Island kingship passed from one generation to the next. The idea that leadership must be earned rather than inherited, that strength must serve justice rather than pride, that tradition must evolve rather than calcify. But for now, walking through Pike's ancient halls with his son's sleepy head against his shoulder, King Theon Greyjoy reflects on the path that brought them to this moment of peace and prosperity. Every choice, from the boyhood decision to stay with his father through the adult choices, to ally with former enemies and adapt to changing times, led to this transformation. The Iron Islands are still the Iron Islands. Their people are still hard as iron, fluid as water, and enduring as the sea. But they have become something more, partners in a larger world rather than predators upon it, protectors of commerce rather than its destroyers, builders of bridges rather than barriers. Standing at his solar window as the castle settles into sleep, Theon sees torches moving between the islands as fishing boats return from their nets and merchant vessels prepare for dawn departures. The sea that once carried raiders seeking plunder now carries traders seeking profit, explorers seeking knowledge, and diplomats seeking cooperation. The boy who chose loyalty over comfort has become a king who chose growth over stagnation, cooperation over isolation, wisdom over pride. The revolution he helped build has succeeded beyond his father's wildest dreams, to creating an Iron Islands that commands respect rather than fear, admiration rather than hatred. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, new choices to be made. But tonight, King Theon Greyjoy sleeps peacefully in the knowledge that his people are safe, prosperous, and free, not despite the changing world, but because they learned to change with it. What is dead may never die, the old words say. But what lives may grow stronger, wiser, and more worthy of the life it has been given. The Iron Islands live, and they have never been stronger. The Kraken still swims in the depths of the sea, but now it swims in deeper waters than ever before, and its tentacles reach toward cooperation rather than conquest. The transformation is complete, the legacy secure, and the future bright with possibilities that the raiders of old could never have imagined. In the end, the greatest iron price was paid not in blood or gold, but in the courage to become something better than what came before. And that price, unlike all the others, was worth every sacrifice it required.